Chapter 504. Xu Qingchen sipped his tea with a smile and listened to their conversation. Feng Zhiyao was a person who loved to see the world in chaos. He hated it when people stayed out of things. He immediately showed concern for young Master Qingchen. Young Master Qingchen, you haven't liked to talk since we left the northwest. Are you in a bad mood? Everyone present immediately recalled Princess Anxi's affection for young Master Qingchen and the friendship between young Master Qingchen and Princess Anxi. Perhaps it wasn't that young Master Qingchen didn't like Princess Anxi, but that he was too reserved to say it. So now that Princess Anxi had married someone else, young Master Qingchen was sad. Everyone immediately imagined a series of unspeakable things about young Master Qingchen and Princess Anxi. They looked at Xu Qingchen with sympathy. Xu Qingchen's handsome face couldn't help but twitch. He sighed helplessly and said, "I'm just thinking, these people have been following us all the way. Will something happen to them?" Everyone looked out the window. There were all kinds of people standing on the opposite side of the street, around the corner, and under the big trees. They seemed to be chatting idly, setting up a stall, or passing by occasionally, but such disguises were extremely clumsy in their eyes. Feng Zhiyao narrowed his eyes and said, "You don't say, there are more and more people following us. Do they really think we haven't noticed them?" Xu Qingchen sighed and said, "It doesn't matter what they think. What I'm worried about is..." Mo Xiaoyao put down his wine cup and looked at Xu Qingchen, saying, "You're worried that Mo Jingqi will kill us?" Xu Qingchen's expression was solemn as he nodded his head. His brows furrowed slightly as he said, "Originally, the Northwest and Great Chu had coexisted peacefully these past few years. Mo Jingqi would not have acted against us if we had borrowed the passage to Nanjiao. But Mo Jingqi is an unstable factor. It's hard to guarantee that they won't do anything to us these days." Yi Li asked, "Big brother, if they really want to do something, where is the best place to do it?" Xu Qingchen shook his head and said, "It depends on when they think it's convenient. We are now standing on Da Chu State's soil. Mo Jingqi can say whatever he wants." Feng Zhiyao sneered, "Besides Shilling, there is only Da Chu State that borders the northwest. Do you want us to take a detour through Shilling?" Xu Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, "We may think this way, but it doesn't mean that Mo Jingqi will think the same way." Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly, "If that's the case, then let him try. Let I see how much Mo Jingqi has improved over the past few years." Feng Zhiyao scoffed. "How much can he improve? The area in the northeast had been ceded to the barbarian tribes there. The great Da Chu state can't even take care of a few tribes on the border. Instead, they are happily fighting with Mo Jingli in the Chu capital. Even though they no longer had anything to do with Da Chu state, when they heard that a piece of land in the northeast of Da Chu state had been taken over by a few tribes, it still made them feel uncomfortable. Especially the soldiers of the Mohist army. They found Mo Jingqi especially unpleasant. In the past, you thought that the Prince Ding mansion and the Mohist army were in your way. Now that the Mohist army and the Prince Ding mansion have nothing to do with you, why don't you work hard and show off your great talent? Since he hasn't improved, then I can help him fix the trash under his command." Mo Xiaoyao said faintly. When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but exchange glances with each other. The prince's words seemed to have a bit of killing intent. However, was it really auspicious to kill someone on the way to their wedding? However, they didn't need to wait for Mo Xiaoyao to come find trouble. Because before they finished eating lunch, trouble had already come knocking on their door. "Someone come. Immediately surround the inn," an arrogant male voice came from downstairs. Feng Zhiyao stood up and looked downstairs. He couldn't help but laugh. "Yo, Prince, it's our old acquaintance." Mo Xiaoyao glanced downstairs and saw the person commanding the soldiers to surround the inn. He raised an eyebrow in confusion. He knew many people. The person in front of him didn't have much of an influence. He remembered what kind of old acquaintance he was. Feng Zhiyao smiled. "Prince, look carefully at this person's face that makes people want to slap him. Also, look at that lame leg. Don't you think he looks familiar?" When he said this, Mo Xiaoyao remembered. The one that was trampled by the horse. Why didn't the horse trample him to death? Feng Zhiyao smiled and said, Should this subordinate find another horse to trample on? The people upstairs were still talking and laughing, but the people downstairs couldn't help but shout. They saw Guan Ren limping back and forth across the street. He shouted to the other side, "A group of traitors dares to set foot on Dhu State's land. This general is under the orders of the emperor to eliminate the traitors. Why haven't you all surrendered yet?" Upstairs, Feng Jiao couldn't help but grumble, "If it was me, I would have shot 10,000 arrows at the inn and turned it into a hedgehog. He doesn't have much skill, but he talks a lot of nonsense." Qin Feng smiled and said, "So young Master Feng-san will live longer than him." Feng Jiao's face was full of smiles. He cupped his hands in thanks and said, "Thank you for your auspicious words." Qin Feng stood and looked disdainfully at the arrogant people downstairs. He tilted his head and asked, "Prince, Wang Fei, should we kill him first?" Mo Xiaoyao stood and said, "No need. Let's go down and take a look first." "That's right. Find someone to take young Master Qing Chen away first." Even the weakest of them had the ability to protect themselves. Only Shu Qingchen had no strength to truss up a chicken. If a fight broke out later, even though protecting Shu Qingchen wouldn't be difficult, there were always accidents in the midst of chaos. Shu Qingchen also knew that he was a burden. He nodded in agreement with Mo Xiaoyao's words. He only said to Yi Li, "You must be careful." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "Big brother, don't worry." After sending off Shu Qingchen, the group followed Mo Xiaoyao downstairs to watch the commotion. The guards who had been eating in the main hall downstairs had already stood and were guarding the door. On the street outside the door, there were a few corpses of Dhu state soldiers who didn't listen to warnings and wanted to charge into the inn first. Guan Rong clearly hadn't thought that the guards of the Prince Ding mansion would be so tough. They dared to kill people so easily even when surrounded by his soldiers. His already ugly face was now ashen. His expression was twisted to express his anger. "You all have great guts. You still dare to be so arrogant when you're about to die. I will crush all of you to pieces to appease the hatred in my heart." Guan Rong, who was under the protection of many soldiers, shouted at the guards at the door. The guards at the door, especially Qi Lin's guards, couldn't help but twitch their mouths. They looked at Guan Rong like they were looking at an idiot and a dead person. This idiot didn't think that he would be safe if he hid behind people, so he was so arrogant, right? One of Qi Lin couldn't help but raise his hand and throw it at the person in front of him. With a swooshing sound, a green beam of light shot towards Guan Ren with great speed and accuracy. Guan Rong suddenly shot a green object at himself. Naturally, he jumped in fright and tried to dodge. But he was hiding in the middle of the soldiers and had grown fat over the years. How could he dodge? He didn't even have time to crouch down before the object arrived in front of him. He was so scared that he immediately shouted, "Hidden weapon! Hidden weapon! Save me! Save me!" Chapter 505. When that thing landed on his body, he felt a bone-piercing pain in his shoulder, but it wasn't enough to take his life. Everyone, including the Dhu state soldiers that Guan Ju had brought with him, couldn't help but look at the man who was shouting and yelling like he was an idiot. Someone muttered, "Idiot." Guan Ju realized something was wrong after yelling for a while. He opened his eyes and found that he was completely fine. He couldn't help but feel happy. Then he saw that his beautiful clothes were stained with something strange and wet. It had a faint fragrance. What is this?" Reporting to General, "It's a cucumber," the soldier beside him reported seriously. Only then did Guan Ju see a half-eaten cucumber on the ground not far away. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. He flew into a rage. "I'm going to kill you all. I'm going to kill you all. Go, kill these traitors. Guan Ju, who do you want to kill? Why don't you tell I?" A cold and clear voice leisurely sounded from the inn. The guards immediately moved aside to make a path. Mo Xiaoyao's hair was still as white as snow. He appeared in front of everyone, holding Yi Li's hand in his white robes. "Guan Ju, who do you want to kill? Why don't you tell I?" When Guan Ju saw the white-haired Mo Xiaoyao walk out, he was shocked. But this time, he wasn't afraid of Mo Xiaoyao. In Guan Ju's heart, he was a loyal official of the Dhu state, the emperor's trusted aide. Mo Xiaoyao was just a traitor that everyone despised. More importantly, there were at least 3,000 elite soldiers inside and outside the small city, while Mo Xiaoyao only had a few dozen people. No matter how strong the Mohist army was, Guan Ju couldn't think of any reason why he would lose when he had such an advantage. So, after the initial shock, Guan Ren looked at Mo Xiaoyao with an arrogant and sinister expression again. That pair of eyes that appeared even smaller due to the excessive eating over the past few years were filled with resentment and jealousy. That's right, it was jealousy. In this world, including the ruler of a country, Mo Jingqi, there were probably not many men who did not hate Mo Xiaoyao. He had the Prince Ding mansion and the Mohist army, two of the most tyrannical forces in the world. He had one of the best martial arts skills in the world, an outstanding handsome face, and a wife and adorable son that all ambitious men envied. There was no reason for the world not to be jealous of Mo Xiaoyao. However, Guan Ren's hatred for Mo Xiaoyao was far greater than anyone else's. When he was still following Mo Jingqi, who was still a young prince, the high-spirited and elegant little heir of Prince Ding was the object of his envy and jealousy. On the other side, at the foot of the mountain where the bandits were exterminated, Mo Xiaoyao, dressed in white, rode his horse over. Without saying a word, he ruthlessly whipped him. He made him lose face in front of thousands of soldiers. From that moment on, Guan Ren developed a hatred and jealousy towards Mo Xiaoyao from the bottom of his heart. He hated Mo Xiaoyao's background. If Mo Xiaoyao wasn't the heir of the Prince Ding mansion, how could he dare to whip him in front of so many people? If he wasn't Mo Lanyun's descendant and Mo Liu Fang's son, how could he have such good talent? So, when he saw the Prince Ding mansion's misfortune, he was one of the happiest people. Ding! Mo Xiaoyao, a traitor like you still dares to set foot on Dachu State's land? Today, I will tear you to pieces to repay the emperor's kindness. Guan Ren pointed at Mo Xiaoyao and shouted righteously. Mo Xiaoyao casually glanced at Guan Ren and lightly said, Mo Jingqi is becoming less and less picky with the people he uses. Letting a cripple lead the troops outside, even if he isn't worried about you falling off your horse, he should be worried about the safety of the soldiers below. Feng Zhiyao waved his fan and said with a smile, Isn't that right? With General Guan's crippled appearance, he definitely won't be able to walk onto the battlefield. If he falls off his horse and hits the soldiers beside him, what will happen? TSK, the emperor really doesn't know how to cherish his soldiers. You. Guan Ren was so angry he was panting. What he hated the most was other people mentioning his leg. He was a military general. If his leg was crippled, it was the end of everything. Even if he was a civil official, for the sake of the face of the court, he would not let a cripple enter the court as an official. That was why the emperor sent him out to lead the troops because of their past friendship. In fact, it was not his turn to lead the troops onto the battlefield. It was just an empty title. Although he had lived a good life these past few years, how could the southwest border compare to the prosperity of the Chu capital? And all of this was caused by the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Although Guan Ren did not know that his leg was broken by a horse because the Prince Ding mansion pushed Murongshan to guard Shattering Snowpass, he still wholeheartedly put the blame on the Prince Ding mansion. However, Guan Ren's reason was that he was Mo Jingqi's trusted aide, so Mo Xiaoyao deliberately wanted to get rid of him. I will kill you all. I will kill you all. Shoot the arrows and kill these traitors. Guan Ren finally could not hold back his anger and roared. However, the soldiers under his command were not as obedient as he imagined. After all, the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion in the Dachu state had lasted for hundreds of years. It was an eternal legend in the army. It was not something that Mo Jingqi could completely destroy. If Mo Jingqi was given 20 or 30 years, he might be able to completely destroy the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion in the Dachu state. However, 5 years was too short. Moreover, when the Northwest announced its break with the Dachu state, the announcement was spread all over the country. The commoners and soldiers might not understand the principles, but they also understood that it was the imperial family that had wronged the Prince Ding mansion, not the other way around. The Prince Ding mansion had wronged the Dachu state. The hatred of killing one's father was irreconcilable. Prince Ding did not immediately lead the Mohist army to the capital to avenge his father and brother. In the eyes of the commoners, Prince Ding was magnanimous and still remembered the friendship of protecting the Da Chu state for hundreds of years. At this moment, Guan Ren wanted the soldiers to immediately kill Mo Xiaoyao and his men. Even if the soldiers did not care about the reputation of the Prince Ding mansion, they still had to consider the mysterious Qi Lin of the Prince Ding mansion. Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the soldiers surrounding the inn with a faint smile. The soldiers who were still holding their bows and arrows hesitated, but after this faint glance, they could not help but put down their bows and arrows. Guan Ren saw that the soldiers did not listen to his orders and was so angry that his face turned black. He roared, "Impudent! Are you all going to rebel as well? Why aren't you executing these traitors?" The soldiers were naturally in a dilemma. They did not want to and were not willing to become enemies with the Prince Ding mansion, but Guan Ren was their superior. Even if this superior did not have the support of the people, they still had to listen to his orders. Feng Zhiyao walked out of the crowd with a smile on his face. He smiled and said to the crowd, "Actually, there is no need for everyone to worry about the future. This problem is very easy to solve." The crowd was puzzled. They did not know how this elegant red-clothed young master was going to solve this problem. Feng Zhiyao waved his sleeve and a long whip shot out from his sleeve, heading straight for Guan Ren. In the blink of an eye, Guan Ren had been tied up tightly by the whip and was pulled out of the crowd in front of Feng Zhiyao. It was also Guan Ren's fault for not noticing people after he was attacked by the cucumber. There were too many of them and it was not convenient for him to dodge. Therefore, he had his men spread out a little. Otherwise, Feng Zhiyao might not have been able to pull him out of the crowd. Chapter 506. Feng Zhiyao lowered his head to look at Guan Ren, who had been tied up tightly by his whip. He used his fan to prop up his chin and smiled from ear to ear. "Isn't this settled? We'll take this Guan guy away. You just need to go back and report the truth. Don't worry, he won't be coming back." The soldiers hesitated for a moment, but in the end, they still opened up a path. Originally, Guan Ren had not obtained the approval of General Jing Bian, the commander stationed in the southwest. Instead, he had received Mo Jingqi's secret edict to act in secret. Therefore, if they went back and reported that Guan Ren had been taken away, General Jing Bian would not punish them. This way, they would not have to fight with the Prince Ding mansion. It was the best of both worlds. The soldiers felt satisfied, but Guan Ren did not feel the same way. Guan Ren naturally understood the meaning behind Feng Zhiyao's words. If he was really taken away by Prince Ding, his life would be over. "You dare. When this general returns, I will definitely report this to the emperor and have all of your families executed." It would have been better if he hadn't said this. Once he finished speaking, the soldiers retreated even faster. The deputy at the very back even cupped his hands towards Feng Zhiyao and the others. "This matter concerns the lives of several thousand of our soldiers. I ask that Prince take the trouble to deal with this." Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes slightly and said indifferently, "Don't worry, I will not implicate you." The deputy was delighted. "Many thanks to Prince." Seeing the Da Chu state soldiers retreat, Feng Zhiyao held Guan Ren and turned around to ask, "Prince, should we leave this place first?" Several thousand soldiers had entered the city. Such an important matter could not be concealed. It was better for them to leave this place first. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, "If you've eaten, then let's leave." The group of people dragged Guan Ren, who had been turned into a dumpling, out of the city. While they were still at the inn, Guan Ren had been cursing non-stop. Feng Zhiyao found his cursing unbearable and casually picked up a rag from the table and stuffed it into his mouth. Guan Ku's eyes rolled back from the greasy cloth and she could only whimper. Less than 10 miles out of the city, Qin Feng, who was leading the way, suddenly stopped. The people behind him naturally stopped as well, vigilantly watching everything around them. Qin Feng sneered and said, "Come out. You can't even hide properly, yet you still want to follow others and launch a sneak attack?" Before his voice died away, several sharp arrows whizzed towards Qin Feng. Qin Feng didn't even bother to get off the horse. He sat sideways on the horse's back and dodged the arrow. Many black-clothed and masked figures jumped out from the trees on the surrounding hillsides. Feng Jiao leaned against Zhuojing and muttered to himself. I knew that this trip to Nanjiao would not be so satisfying. But, is it really okay to wear black clothes and cover your face for half the day? In broad daylight, what color was more eye-catching than black? The corners of Zhuojing's mouth twitched. He distanced himself from Feng Jiao and said coolly, assassins usually like to wear black clothes and cover their faces. Nonsense. The Yangwang chamber has so many assassins. When have you ever seen them wear black clothes and cover their faces? Feng Jiao retorted. The Yangwang chamber was known as the #1 assassin organization in the world, but they never wore uniforms. This meant that uniform clothing was more harmful than beneficial to an assassin organization. Third-rate assassins, Zhuojing said calmly. Listening to Feng Jiao and Zhuojing's mocking and ridiculing each other, the atmosphere that should have been austere and tense became inexplicably funny. Although the expressions of the black-clothed assassins could not be seen because their faces were covered, their eyes that seemed to emit fire was enough to show their anger. Feng Jiao smiled and looked at the assassins across from him. He smiled carelessly and said, actually, other than third-rate assassins, there is another kind of person who must cover their faces in broad daylight. Yi Li asked with a smile, what kind of person? Feng Jiao smiled and said, people who can't be seen. For example, imperial bodyguards. The assassins were silent, but they still couldn't hide the astonishment in their eyes. Mo Xiaoyao stepped forward and looked at the assassins surrounding him with his hands behind his back. He smiled coolly and said, imperial bodyguards. Mo Jingqi's actions are just to cover up his name. It's really unnecessary. Feng Jiao smiled and said, isn't that so? Our Prince Ding mansion has already cut off all ties with the Dachu state. If Mo Jingqi wants to kill our prince, he can just directly send people over. Isn't it good just like what happened in the city? Why does he have to be so sneaky? However, Qin Feng said coldly, we will think that the Dachu state wants to provoke the Mohist army. The assassins hesitated. The leader pointed his blade at Mo Xiaoyao and said harshly, Prince Dingyi, there's no need to say more. We are here on orders. If we can't bring back the prince and Wang Fei's heads, our own heads will fall to the ground. Sorry for the offense. With that, he waved his saber and everyone pounced on Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was indifferent. He casually flicked his sleeve and a strong wind blew 2 assassins to the side. Once Mo Xiaoyao moved, the others naturally would not stay idle. Instantly, the quiet road was filled with the sounds of fighting. The few assassins besieged Mo Xiaoyao but to no avail. With a thought, they turned their target to Yi Li, who was protected in Mo Xiaoyao's embrace with one hand. 4 assassins worked together to use all their strength to divert Mo Xiaoyao's attention. The other 2 assassins took the chance to point their swords at Yi Li. Yi Li was being protected by Mo Xiaoyao and could not move. Seeing that the 2 swords were about to hit Yi Li, the assassin holding the swords was overjoyed. But his body suddenly froze. He felt his chest light up. The Princess Ding who had been in Mo Xiaoyao's arms had disappeared. There was a cold dagger in his chest. A slender hand gripped the hilt of the dagger and pulled it out without hesitation. Instantly, blood spurted out. The assassin who slowly fell down looked with blurry eyes at the beautiful and gentle Ding Wang Fei, who was like the most elegant young lady in the Chu capital holding a dagger that was stained with her own blood. She turned around to dodge another attack and like a light green wind, a thin red mark appeared on his companion's neck. Killing 2 people in the blink of an eye, Yi Li casually flicked the fresh blood off her dagger and frowned. These few years, she had not trained enough and her movements were not as nimble. It seemed that even though she had learned Qinggong and Neigong in this life, she would not be able to return to her peak state in her previous life. However, Yi Li lifted her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao who had cleared out most of the assassins nearby. Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled. This life was different. Even if she could not return to her peak state, it did not matter, right? After Mo Xiaoyao cleared out the assassins near him and Yi Li, he did not make any more moves. The guards around them also automatically separated the assassins from the prince and princess consort. Thus, Yi Li and Mo Xiaofeng became the most leisurely people present, except for the occasional 1 or 2 that slipped through the net. They are stalling for time. Yi Li looked at the assassins surrounding the guards and said with a frown. Mo Xiaoyao said lightly, "They probably did not expect that Trash Guanjie would let us out of that small town. They do not have enough people right now, so they can only stall for time. If they wanted to deal with the guards of the Prince Ding mansion, especially when there was Qi Lin among them, it would be impossible to deal with them without at least 3 to 5 times the number of people. The 100 or so people in front of them were not even enough to make them grind their teeth." Yi Li lifted her head to look at him and said, "You want to?" Chapter 507. Mo Xiaoyao sneered, "Wait. If we don't teach Mo Jingqi a lesson, he won't know what it means to stop. Even though we're not afraid of him, mosquitoes and flies can be a nuisance." Hearing Mo Xiaoyao's words, Yi Li didn't say anything more. She leaned against the horse next to her and observed the fight. The horses of the Prince Ding mansion were all excellent war horses. Even though they were fighting on the official road, the horses only ran to the grass on the side of the road and quietly grazed on the grass. They didn't seem frightened at all. Some of the horses even stood on the official road and took the opportunity to trample on the black-clothed assassins who had been knocked to the ground. Even though the assassins tried their best to stall for time, it only took a little more than a quarter of an hour before the group of assassins were all lying flat on the ground. The bodyguards who followed Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to the south had already had enough of being watched from the shadows no matter where they went. It wasn't easy for them to get some exercise, so naturally they couldn't hold back. When they stopped, they still complained that their opponents were too weak. Mo Xiaoyao naturally couldn't really stop and wait for the other party to come knocking on his door. The group could only continue on their way. As for the corpses on the official road, no one paid any attention to them. After all, commoners didn't walk on the official road, so they didn't have to worry about scaring people. The group knew that they were nearing Shattered Snow Pass by the next day, but they still didn't see anyone chasing after them. If it was Mo Jingqi's men, they wouldn't be so slow. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and waved his hand, ordering, "You guys go back and tie up all the deputy generals along the way." Several Qi Lin men heard the order and immediately went forward to ask, "Prince, should we kill them?" Mo Xiaoyao said calmly, "Tie them up if you can, kill them if you can't." This subordinate obeys. How could they, the Qi Lin, not have a mission that they couldn't complete? Immediately, the group decided that they had to kidnap all of the deputy generals of the 11 Dachu state cities that were seriously ill and bring them back to the northwest. Although it was a bit of a pity, why didn't the prince give the order to kidnap the general? The position of deputy general did not sound too difficult. Hearing this, Feng Jiao asked curiously, "Prince, didn't they stop chasing us?" Looks like he's quite tactful. Mo Jingqi definitely wouldn't just send a group of people to assassinate them, and they didn't hide their tracks along the way. The only explanation was that the generals guarding the city had no intention of chasing after them. The corners of Mo Xiaoyao's lips curled up slightly as he said coldly, "There's a price to pay for making I wait for nothing." Feng Jiao couldn't help but shiver. In the end, it was Mo Jingqi who had provoked the prince, right? Thinking about Mo Jingqi's expression when the news of all the deputy generals suddenly being kidnapped and disappearing reached the Chu capital, Feng Jiao was secretly amused. If they could kidnap the deputy generals, they could naturally kidnap the general. He believed that their journey back from Nanjiao would be much smoother and cleaner. "Prince, Shattered Snow Pass is up ahead. Do you think General Murong would?" Mo Xiaoyao shook his head and said, "General Murong is a righteous and upright person. Mo Jingqi would never give him such an order. Even if Mo Jingqi's people were at Shattered Snow Pass, it wouldn't be easy to move troops without permission." Feng Jiao nodded, "That's true." Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and said to Yi Li, "How about we rest for a day in Yonglin and come out the day after tomorrow?" Yi Li nodded and said, "You can decide. Big Brother should also be waiting for us in Yonglin." Looking at the city that was already in sight, Yi Li couldn't help but sigh in her heart. In the blink of an eye, 5 or 6 years had already passed. 6 years ago, she was still doing her best to protect this small city. But now, this place already seemed to have nothing to do with them. Sure enough, Shu Qingchen was waiting for them in Yonglin. When everyone arrived at the small city of Yonglin, young Master Qingchen was sitting leisurely in the best tea house in Yonglin City, drinking tea. Seeing them come in, Xu Qingchen smiled and said, "I've been waiting for you for a long time. I've already booked an inn. How about we rest for a day in Yonglin before coming out?" Yi Li smiled and said, "Big brother is very thoughtful. Xiaoyao and I also have the same plan." Everyone took a seat. Xu Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, "It seems that everyone didn't have enough fun on the way." Hearing this, Feng Jiao was immediately filled with resentment and complained, "Isn't that so? Young Master Qingchen, you don't know. We've been walking and waiting all this time. In the end, we've already passed the Cloud Mist River, but those cowards still haven't caught up with us. You made me look forward to it. These past few years had been too peaceful. In the northwest, there were even people fighting to suppress bandits. So much so that there weren't even any bandits in the northwest now. Really, his hands were itching. Mo Jingqi is really boring. If he gives the order to kill us, he'll definitely kill us. If he gave an order, how would those generals dare to disobey? I also want to experience the feeling of being surrounded by thousands of soldiers. Look at now, the people below are cutting corners. If Mo Jingqi knew that we left Shattered Snow Pass without losing a single soldier, I wonder if he would die of anger." Xu Qingchen shook his head and said with a smile, "Feng-san, you're thinking too much. Mo Jingqi can't possibly make an announcement. Once it's announced to the world, it's tantamount to officially declaring war on the Mohist army. I'm afraid that before he can kill us, the Mohist army will march to Feihong Pass. If they can really kill the prince with all they have, then it's fine. But if the prince comes to the northwest..." The anger of Prince Ding and the nearly 1 million Mohist army wasn't something that just anyone could bear. After listening to Xu Qingchen's analysis, Feng-san could only express regret for Mo Jingqi's cowardice. Reporting to Prince, downstairs, an envoy from Da Chu State requests an audience. An imperial bodyguard came up to report. An envoy from Da Chu State? Feng Jiao was somewhat astonished. He looked at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li and asked, "In this kind of situation, an envoy from Da Chu State can still request an audience with the prince?" Xu Qingchen smiled indifferently and said, "Feng-san, why don't you guess who the envoy from Da Chu State is?" Feng Jiao looked at him and said, "Could it be that young Master Qingchen has already met him?" Xu Qingchen shook his head and said, "I haven't, but I can make a few guesses. Nanzhao has sent a letter of credence to invite the rulers and dignitaries of various countries to attend Princess Anche's wedding. Da Chu State can't send an envoy that's too low in rank, but, with Mo Jingqi's personality, he won't come in person. Mo Jingqi was someone who valued his status the most and was also very vigilant about his own safety. Mo Jingqi hadn't even been 100 li away from the capital, much less come to Nanzhao, which was thousands of li away. Usually, unless it was absolutely necessary, he would stay within the heavily guarded palace and would never take half a step out of the palace. Mo Jingqi already knew that Prince Li has some connections with Nanjiang. This time, he won't let Prince Li get ahead of him. In the entire capital, Mo Jingqi can only trust the Liu family. Xu Qingchen smiled faintly, but there was a hint of coldness in his smile. When Mo Jingqi suddenly decided to make an example of the Xu family, the Liu family must have instigated it. Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said, "Liu Chunfeng?" Feng Jiao blinked and asked, "Who is Liu Chunfeng?" Zhuo Jing laughed softly and said, "Young Master Feng, Liu Chunfeng is Prime Minister Liu, noble consort Liu's father." It was no wonder that Feng Jiao didn't know. Although noble consort Liu was about the same age as Mo Xiaoyao and the others, Liu Chunfeng himself was only 2 years younger than Duke of Hua. In Feng Jiao's memory, he was Prime Minister Liu by the time he noticed this person. Naturally, he didn't remember his name. Chapter 508. Xu Qingchen nodded and said, "That's right. I guess the messenger from Da Chu State is Liu Chunfeng." Yi Li frowned slightly and looked at Mo Xiaoyao, who was next to her. "Does Prince Liu have a relationship with Prime Minister Liu?" Mo Xiaoyao sneered and said, "The Prince Ding mansion and the Liu family have always been at odds. How can they be friends?" When Mo Liufang was still young, the Liu family was not led by Prime Minister Liu, but by Old Master Liu, who had passed away. Old Master Liu became the prime minister when he was over 60 years old. However, Prince Regent Mo Liufang, who was only in his 20s, was above him. How could Old Master Liu, who was narrow-minded, tolerate that? During those years, Old Master Liu had always made things difficult for Mo Liufang. Therefore, the relationship between the Prince Ding mansion and the Liu family had never been good. That was why noble consort Liu was infatuated with Mo Xiaoyao back then. Not only did Mo Xiaoyao have no interest in her, but even the Liu family did not agree to the marriage. Instead, they sent her to the palace without hesitation. Let him in. I also want to see why he wants to see I, Mo Xiaoyao ordered calmly. Not long after, the man was led into the tea house. As expected, it was Prime Minister Liu, who had white hair and a beard. Although Liu Chunfeng was old, his body and spirit seemed to be in good condition. His pair of cloudy eyes were shining with shrewdness. However, the people standing next to him stunned everyone. There were two women standing next to Prime Minister Liu. The older one was wearing a snow-white robe. Her beautiful face looked cold. Who else could it be other than noble consort Liu? Although noble consort Liu was over 30 years old, time seemed to be extra kind to her. She did not look much different from 5 or 6 years ago. Standing next to noble consort Liu was a 13 or 14-year-old girl. She was wearing a light yellow robe embroidered with pink and white hibiscus flowers. Her face, which had gradually grown up, was already showing a faint trace of beauty. It could be imagined that in 2 years, the young girl's appearance would definitely not be inferior to noble consort Liu's. Her clear and bright eyes revealed a purity and elegance that noble consort Liu would never have. Seeing Yi Li, the girl's face lit up. She couldn't help but take a step forward and call out softly, "Princess Ding." Yi Li was slightly startled. Looking at the countenance that bore some resemblance to Empress Hua and Hua Tianxiang, her heart stirred as she said, "Princess Changle." Seeing that Yi Li remembered her, Princess Changle nodded her head in delight. She lifted her foot, intending to walk towards Yi Li. Behind her, noble consort Liu lightly coughed, indifferently saying, "Princess, as the princess of a country, you should pay attention to etiquette. Do not lose your decorum and shame the emperor." Halting her steps, Princess Changle turned her head to look at noble consort Liu. Beaming, she replied, "Many thanks to noble consort for the reminder." However, it was not this princess who wanted to come up. Rather, it was noble consort who suggested it. This princess only wishes to reminisce about the past with Princess Ding. "I wonder who your highness wishes to reminisce with?" Noble consort Liu's complexion changed as she stared fixedly at Princess Changle. Princess Changle was not afraid, unhesitatingly returning her gaze. After a while, noble consort Liu replied, "I naturally wish to reminisce with Princess Ding." Yi Li stood up. Smiling faintly, she said, "It is rare to meet an old friend in this border town. Since both noble consort and the princess wish to reminisce with this consort, why don't we change locations? This will also prevent noble consort's reputation from being ruined." Princess Changle cheerfully took Yi Li's hand. Smiling, she said, "Princess Ding, long time no see. I thought we would never see each other again. Let's go somewhere else to talk." Finished speaking, Princess Changle pulled Yi Li towards a side room. The entire upper floor of the tea house had been reserved by Shu Qingchen. There was no need to worry that Princess Changle would casually walk into someone else's room. After taking 2 steps with Yi Li, Princess Changle turned her head to look at noble consort Liu, who was still standing in her original position. Narrowing her watery eyes, she smiled and said, "Noble consort Liu, you are still not leaving? Even if this princess's reputation is somewhat lacking, it does not matter. The emperor's daughter does not have to worry about marriage. However, if noble consort Liu, I wonder if imperial father would like to hear someone say that a pear blossom is unfaithful? What nonsense are you speaking?" Noble consort Liu's face reddened. Glancing at the purple-clothed, silver-haired man with his back to her, she quickly followed. Behind her, Feng Jiao finally recovered his wits. Pointing in the direction that Princess Changle had disappeared, he clicked his tongue and said, "That girl is Princess Changle?" Mo Xiaoyao raised his eyes and glanced at him, indifferently lowering his gaze to drink his tea. Do you have any objections? Feng Zhiao was embarrassed and speechless. What objections could he have? Although he had only met Princess Changle once or twice, he still remembered the innocent and adorable appearance of the little princess, who had been doted on and protected by older sister Hua. Previously, he had even been jealous of this little princess, because she had received all of that person's love and care. However, was this the so-called a girl changes 18 times between childhood and womanhood? That innocent and adorable little princess could actually casually spit out such bitter mockery. Xu Qingchen lowered her eyes, indifferently saying, Princess Changle's days in the palace are not easy. Feng Zhiao remained silent, his expression gradually sinking. Ever since the Empress had pleaded for leniency for the Xu family several years ago, she had been stripped of her right to control the harem by the Emperor. Although everything else remained the same, with the Empress's connections and prestige in the palace, no one dared to be disrespectful to her. However, an empress who wielded real power was different from an empress who was merely a figurehead. Standing to the side, Prime Minister Liu's complexion alternated between green and white. These people had absolutely no intention of inviting him to sit. They even discussed in front of him how his daughter, who was in charge of the imperial harem, had treated Princess Changle harshly. Prime Minister Liu was so angry that his beard stood up. He could not help but interrupt. Third young Master Feng's words are too serious. Has my daughter ever mistreated Princess Changle? Feng Zhiao, Zhuo Jing, and Lin Han, who had been engaged in a heated discussion, immediately quieted down. Zhuo Jing's expression changed, returning to its usual indifference. Tilting his head, he glanced at Prime Minister Liu and said, Prime Minister Liu, don't you know manners to disturb others' conversation? Prime Minister Liu was so angry that he fell backwards. Pointing at Zhuo Jing, he stammered for a long time, unable to say anything. After a long time, he finally calmed down. Fuming, he said, leaving a guest to the side, is this how the Prince Ding mansion treats its guests? Those who are welcomed are guests. Those who come uninvited. Lin Han looked at Prime Minister Liu sincerely, using his expression to tell him that they had not invited him upstairs. Feng Zhiao supported his chin with one hand, casually saying, Furthermore, Prime Minister Liu, this young master not only suspects that the Liu family does not follow the rules, but that the entire imperial family of the Da Chu state does not follow the rules, right? Just now, when we came upstairs, how did you walk? Prime Minister Liu walked in front, with Princess Changle at the back. What's the problem? Prime Minister Liu unhappily asked. Feng Zhiao sneered and said, Prime Minister Liu, Noble Consort Liu is a standard first-rank official. Princess Changle is also a standard first-rank official. As for you, the Prime Minister, you are a standard first-rank official. However, isn't there a difference between different first-rank officials? No matter how high Noble Consort Liu's rank is, she is still a concubine. Princess Changle is the Empress's legitimate daughter. Let me ask you, would your family allow a concubine to walk in front of a daughter of the first wife? Moreover, you are a concubine's father. Feng Zhiao. You. Prime Minister Liu was so angry that his entire body began to tremble. The finger he used to point at Feng Zhiao trembled incessantly. He could not say that Feng Zhiao was wrong. Under normal circumstances, as the Prime Minister, he was required to salute Princess Changle when he saw her. As for the situation between Noble Consort Liu and Princess Changle, he could not say that the rules of the imperial family were different from those of ordinary families. Although in the palace, Princess Changle had to perform the etiquette of a junior to Noble Consort Liu, in the eyes of the scholars of the realm, Princess Changle, as the eldest princess of the first wife, was more honorable than Noble Consort Liu. The eldest daughter of the first wife saluted Noble Consort Liu out of respect and courtesy for her imperial father. It was not necessary. Chapter 509. Prince Ding, is this how you discipline your subordinates? Prime Minister Liu was so angry that he did not choose his words carefully, directly pointing the spearhead at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao tilted his head, his sword-like eyebrows slightly raised. The corners of his lips hooked up in a cold smile. How I discipline my subordinates is none of your business. Prime Minister Liu finally understood that he could not gain the slightest advantage in front of the people of the Prince Ding mansion. Not to mention Feng Zhiyao, Zhuo Jing, and the others, there was also Xu Qingchen, who had not spoken at all. Xu Qingchen was a formidable figure who, at the age of 17, had caused the eminent monks of the present age to vomit blood. As a result, Prime Minister Liu's eyes rolled back, and he directly collapsed. Feng Zhiyao blinked his eyes. That's it. Recently, they had encountered Mo Jingqi's men. Regardless of whether it was civil or martial, why were their combat prowess so weak? Xu Qingchen smiled faintly. It's not that it's impossible. This is the best way to withdraw. This showed that Prime Minister Liu knew when to yield and when to stand tall. If he continued to persist, it was likely that he would faint from Feng Zhiyao and the others' provocations. In the end, Xu Qingchen could not allow an old man in his 70s or 80s to lie on the ground all alone. He indicated to the imperial bodyguards standing at the foot of the stairs to have Prime Minister Liu's attendants bring him down to see a physician. In the other side of the room, the atmosphere was completely different from outside. Princess Chang'e tugged at Yi Li and chattered incessantly. Her somewhat tender and beautiful face had a bit of innocence and sincerity. Yi Li smiled as she looked at Princess Chang'e, her eyes filled with warmth. After not seeing each other for several years, the once lowly girl had already grown into a slender and elegant young lady. Only noble consort Liu sat a bit further from the two. Her expression was indifferent and somewhat absent-minded. Clearly, she had no intention of reminiscing about old times with Yi Li. Noble consort Liu did not pay attention to Yi Li. Yi Li also did not intend to pay attention to noble consort Liu. Originally, when they first met several years ago, Yi Li had a somewhat favorable impression of noble consort Liu. After all, it was not easy to have such a unique woman in the palace. However, after seeing noble consort Liu's infatuation with Mo Xiaoyao and how she targeted her both openly and secretly, Yi Li's good impression of her had completely disappeared. After all, no matter how much noble consort Liu loved Mo Xiaoyao, she, Yi Li, was Mo Xiaoyao's legal wife. She had no problem with noble consort Liu liking Mo Xiaoyao, but it was a bit too much for her to be so fond of his first wife that she disliked her. Especially when Yi Li saw noble consort Liu's cold and noble appearance, she easily thought of how she begged Mo Xiaoyao in the peach forest in the imperial palace. She couldn't help but feel upset. Princess Ding, I heard that you gave birth to an adorable little brother. Pulling on Yi Li's arm, Princess Chang'e asked curiously. Yi Li smiled and nodded. That's right. He's already 5 years old. Sighing, Princess Chang'e said, the little brother born to Princess Ding and Prince Ding's uncle is definitely adorable and intelligent. Why did Princess Consort not bring him to the southern border? Yi Li looked at Princess Chang'e's regretful expression. Yi Li could not help but laugh. Raising her hand, she tapped Princess Chang'e's nose and laughed. There are so many little brothers in the palace. Has Princess not seen enough? Princess Chang'e lightly snorted, her small lips curling as she replied, Imperial Mother did not give me a little brother. Chang'e does not have a little brother. Good, good, good. You don't have a little brother. Then in the future, our Xiaobao will call you Big Sister Princess, okay? Yi Li could not help but laugh. Princess Chang'e's eyes brightened. Blinking her eyes, she smiled and said, really? Then, should I give my little brother a greeting gift? I cannot go to the northwest right now. Princess Consort, help me bring it back to my little brother. In the future, when my little brother sees Chang'e, he will like me. As she spoke, she lowered her head to look at herself. Without the slightest hesitation, she pulled off an exquisite jade bell from her wrist and stuffed it into Yi Li's bosom. Somewhat astonished, Yi Li held the jade bell. It was exquisitely carved from the highest quality white jade and had an auspicious design of a dragon and a phoenix. The dragon and phoenix intertwined to form a small ball. Between the hollow dragon and phoenix, one could see a round jade bead wrapped within. Although it was only a small and exquisite bell, the incomparably exquisite craftsmanship and the highest quality jade made it obvious at a glance that it was extremely valuable. With Princess Chang'e being so generous, Even noble consort Liu could not help but glance at her. Frowning, she stated, "Princess, this jade bell was bestowed to you by the Empress Dowager." Princess Changle's face sank in displeasure. She replied, "Since Imperial Grandmother bestowed it to it is I's. What does it have to do with noble consort Liu who I wish to give it to?" Yi Li reached out to hold Princess Changle. Smiling, she replied, "All right. I thank Princess for your gift on behalf of Chen Er. Speaking of which, I should also give Princess a gift on behalf of Chen Er. However, I really don't have anything on me that I can take out." Princess Changle's eyes brightened. Blinking her eyes, she looked at Yi Li and asked, "Princess, can't you choose your own gift?" Raising her brows, Yi Li asked with a smile, "What does Princess want?" Rising, Princess Changle leaned over to Yi Li and whispered a few words into her ear. Yi Li frowned slightly. Somewhat puzzled, she asked, "What do you want it for?" Pursing her lips, Princess Changle tugged at the small braids in front of her chest. Smiling, she replied, "For fun, of course. No one else is willing to give it to me. I know that Princess definitely has it. I just want one. Is that okay, Princess?" Thinking it over, Yi Li replied, "I'll go back and look for it. If I have it, I'll give it to you." Princess Changle's eyes curved into crescents as she smiled. "I just knew that Princess Ding is the best." Yi Li raised her hand and stroked Princess Changle's hair. Softly, she asked, "That's right. Why did your imperial father send you to attend Princess Anchi's wedding?" Hearing these words, Princess Changle's originally clear eyes dimmed slightly. That night, after returning to her room, Yi Li was still frowning as she pondered the matter of Princess Changle. Although in Yi Li's eyes, Princess Changle was still a child, in reality, she had already grown up. Although Princess Changle would occasionally provoke noble consort Liu, she understood what could and could not be said. As a result, she could only casually find an excuse for Yi Li's question. Yi Li also understood that although Princess Changle was a princess, she did not have freedom. As such, she did not force her. "What is Princess Li thinking about?" Mo Xiaoyao asked softly as he supported Yi Li's shoulders from behind. Yi Li turned her head to glance at him. Smiling faintly, she replied, "It's nothing. I'm thinking about Princess Changle's wedding. For the Grand Dhu state to allow a noble consort and a princess to personally attend the wedding of a princess of Nanjiao was truly unreasonable. Of course, noble consort Liu's attendance was even more unreasonable than Princess Changle's. However, Yi Li was more concerned about Princess Changle. Naturally, she did not have any thoughts about noble consort Liu. Mo Xiaoyao sat down by Yi Li's side. As he poured a cup of tea for each of them, he asked, "What's wrong with Changle?" Yi Li replied, "Don't you feel that it's strange that Mo Jingqi did not personally attend Princess Anchi's wedding? Instead, he sent a noble consort and a princess. It was reasonable for a princess to be sent as an envoy to another country. However, sending a noble consort alone to another country was extremely strange." Mo Xiaoyao placed his teacup on the table. Raising his eyes to look at Yi Li, he said, "Mo Jingqi most likely wants a political marriage." "A political marriage?" Yi Li stared blankly, unable to react. "A political marriage? Who is it?" Mo Xiaoyao calmly looked at her, not replying. Yi Li quickly reacted. Frowning, she asked, "Are you talking about Princess Changle? However, Nanjiao does not have a prince, nor does it have any worthy nobles. Why would the eldest princess of Dhu state need a political marriage?" Chapter 510. The king of Nanjiao had no sons. He did not even have any living brothers or nephews. As a result, Princess Anchi had become the crown princess, the next queen of Nanjiao. As a result, who did the princess wish to marry into? Mo Xiaoyao indifferently stated, "Although Nanjiao has no princes, there is still the king of Nanjiao." "You mean?" Yi Li was speechless. She finally understood why Princess Changle's expression had been so gloomy upon hearing her question. Although she had not met the king of Nanjiao, Princess Anchi was already 25 or 26 years old. It seemed that the king of Nanjiao had only had Princess Anshi around the age of 20. In other words, the king of Nanjiao was nearing the age of birth. If this was truly the case, then compared to Princess Changle, Princess Ronghua, who had married the crown prince of the northern tribes, could be considered fortunate. There was another point. If the two countries truly wished to marry into Nanjiao, they should first submit a letter of credence. After the nobles and courtiers of the two countries discussed the wedding, the other side would send someone to escort the bride. This would be a formal marriage. Now that they had sent someone to escort Princess Changle to Nanjiao, it was clear that they were gifting Princess Changle to the king of Nanjiao. As a result, even if they were truly married in the future, the respect that the people of Nanjiao would have for Princess Changle would be very limited. What was Mo Jingqi thinking? Mo Jingli secretly has connections with the Holy Maiden of Nanjiang and several tribes there. Because of her relationship with young Master Qingchen, Princess Anshi has always been on good terms with us. Now that the Dachu state is suffering from internal and external troubles, Mo Jingqi probably wishes to form an alliance with the king of Nanjiao, Mo Xiaoyao calmly stated. Alliance? Yi Li raised her eyebrows. With a smile on his face, Mo Xiaoyao pulled her into his embrace. Resting his chin on her head, he indifferently stated, "This generation's king of Nanjiao has great ambition but little talent." Back then, he rashly entered the palace and the Dachu state was beaten back by Ai, nearly destroying it. On the contrary, Princess Anshi had shown great political talent since she was a child. She was able to help the king of Nanjiao govern Nanjiao at the age of 14. If it weren't for Princess Anshi, Nanjiao wouldn't have been able to recover so quickly after the war. Then there was the Saintess of the Southern Wilderness. Although she didn't have much talent in politics, her scheming methods and the people behind her were all pretty good. Back then, Nanjiao King used the Saintess of Nanjiang to suppress Princess Anshi. In recent years, I heard that the fight between Princess Anshi and the Saintess of Nanjiang has become more and more intense. Nanjiao King is probably having a hard time being stuck in the middle. Yi Li understood. It turned out that this was a power struggle between an incompetent father and two powerful daughters. Yi Li nodded and said, "I understand. After all, the king of Nanjiao is the king of Nanjiao. Even if he doesn't have much ability, as long as he sits on the throne, he can compete with Princess Anshi and Shu Manlin. Because Princess Anshi and Shu Manlin had someone backing them, the king of Nanjiao also planned to form an alliance with Mo Jingqi of the Dachu state. Speaking of which, Shu Manlin should have retired from the position of Saintess and retired to that southern border Holy Land, right?" Mo Xiaoyao indifferently replied, "Rules are set by people. Naturally, there were ways to break them. At the very least, Shu Manlin was still comfortably sitting in the position of Saintess of Nanjiang. Furthermore, she had more freedom and authority than before." Yi Li helplessly sighed. In the end, this was a power struggle between Mo Jingqi and the king of Nanjiao. The only victim was the innocent Princess Changle. Mo Xiaoyao reached out and wrapped his arms around Yi Li, pulling her into his embrace. A hand gently patted her hand, whispering, "Has Princess Li's heart softened?" Yi Li sighed and replied, "Princess Changle is still a child." Mo Xiaoyao replied, "There are no children in the imperial family. She knows what she needs to do." Yi Li wrinkled her brows. Turning to look at him, she stated, "Princess Changle asked me for a dagger." Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment before replying, "Give it to her." Yi Li nodded her head, once again leaning into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace. She was unable to save Princess Changle. If it was only Princess Changle, she would have simply had someone take her away and hide her away. However, behind Princess Changle was the Hua family, the imperial family of the Dachu state, the Empress, and countless other people's fates were not things she could control. Therefore, since she was unable to save Princess Changle, then, she would give her what she wanted. "Xiaoyao, in the future, I don't want Bao Bao to marry someone else." Leaning into Mo Xiaoyao's embrace, Yi Li softly stated. Mo Xiaoyao gently stroked her hair, his eyes filled with a faint warmth. "Our son does not need to rely on marriage for anything." Hearing these words, Yi Li could not help but smile comfortably. That's right, their son did not need to sell out his marriage for any benefits. At this moment, Yi Li was incomparably grateful to Mo Jingqi for introducing her to Mo Xiaoyao. Not only for herself, but also for her child. Xiaoyao, I have never said that meeting you was the happiest thing in my life. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head to look into her clear and beautiful eyes, within which were blazing emotions. Lowering his head, he kissed her fragrant lips, gently rubbing them together. No. In the future, you will say it every day. The next day, not only did Mo Xiaoyao's group not leave Yonglin, but Prime Minister Liu's group also did not leave. Once again, they met at the best restaurant in the city. Yi Li could not help but raise her elegant brows. Her gaze swept over noble consort Liu, who was standing beside Princess Changle. Holding Mo Xiaoyao's arm with one hand, she smiled faintly and asked, "Noble consort and princess are also out shopping? How come I don't see Prime Minister Liu accompanying you?" Noble consort Liu silently looked at the two people standing side by side. Yi Li naturally held onto Mo Xiaoyao's arm. Mo Xiaoyao clearly did not have any expression of rejection. Lowering his head to look at Yi Li, his gaze contained a warmth that he had never shown when looking at others. Noble consort Liu's eyes darkened. She indifferently stated, "My father is unwell." "Thank you for your concern, Miss Yi." Yesterday, Yi Li had naturally heard of Prime Minister Liu's fainting on the spot. In the Prince Ding mansion, apart from Feng Zhiyao, Zhuo Jing was the one who was most adept at pressuring others. Feng Zhiyao had grown up in the light. His expression was one of contempt. Although Zhuo Jing had developed a poker face when he was a shadow guard, his heart was not poker face at all. Not to mention that he held a grudge, his poisonous tongue from time to time could easily strike a blow to others. Prime Minister Liu had provoked these two people at the same time. Furthermore, Mo Xiaoyao was an irresponsible master who never restrained his subordinates. Other than pretending to faint, Prime Minister Liu had no other choice but to withdraw. Rather than saying that he was unwell, it was better to say that he was ashamed to see others. "I see." Yi Li was not interested in what had happened to Prime Minister Liu. As a result, she only nodded and said with a smile, "Then I wish Prime Minister Liu a speedy recovery. As husband and wife, we still need to have a meal. We won't disturb noble consort and princess any longer. Changle, I have prepared the gift you requested. I will have someone deliver it to you later." This noble consort Liu even wanted to make a fuss about how she addressed Princess Changle. Did she think that just because she addressed Princess Changle as Miss Yi, she was not Princess Ding? Princess Changle smiled and said, "Thank you, Princess Changle. Since the two of you have not eaten, why don't you come in together?" Noble consort Liu took a step forward and stared fixedly at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao turned a blind eye to her. Princess Changle's elegant brows frowned. Although there were no outsiders here, they were still outside. This beloved consort of her father, the emperor, was truly too careless. Noble consort Liu, Uncle Prince Ding and the Princess Changle are eating together. Why should we, outsiders, disturb them? If you do not wish to eat, let's go back to an inn. Chapter 511. At this moment, Princess Changle finally understood why noble consort Liu, who had always treated her like air, had dragged her out to eat. She had even said that she was afraid that the food in the inn would not be to her taste. Throughout the entire journey, she had not seen noble consort Liu show any concern for her food. If not for the fact that Princess Changle did not want to stay at the inn and be bored, who would want to eat with her? She would only lose her appetite in front of that face that she thought was holy and inviolable, okay? Noble consort Liu had actually dragged her out to coincidentally meet with Uncle Prince Ding and Princess Ding. If they were in the palace and not outside, Princess Changle would have already reprimanded noble consort Liu for being shameless. Previously, she had heard that noble consort Liu admired Uncle Prince Ding, but she had never seen noble consort Liu so shamelessly insist on disturbing the couple's meal. Noble consort Liu was unwilling to listen to Princess Changle's advice. Instead, she stared fixedly at Mo Xiaoyao and said, "We can be considered old acquaintances. Could it be that you are not even willing to treat me to a meal?" Mo Xiaoyao slightly frowned. Just as noble consort Liu thought that he had finally loosened up and a smile appeared on his face, He raised his head and said with a frown, "I am not familiar with you." The smile that had not yet fully blossomed on noble consort Liu's face immediately froze. Seriously speaking, Mo Xiaoyao and noble consort Liu really could not be considered familiar. When he was young, he had already been engaged. Naturally, he would not look at other women. Even if he had not been engaged, he would not have liked the daughter of a family that did not see eye to eye with his father and brother. After Su Zuidi left, because of his illness, he did not leave his room. As for noble consort Liu, she had long since entered the imperial palace. After marrying Yi Li, he no longer had any women in his eyes. As a result, he truly was not familiar with noble consort Liu. Noble consort Liu was clearly hurt by the words "not familiar." Her beautiful face instantly turned deathly pale. Gritting her teeth, she said, Am I really that unworthy of your attention?" Yi Li frowned. Pulling at Mo Xiaoyao, she said, "I'm hungry. Let's go in and eat. Noble consort Liu and Princess Changle, why don't you come with us?" It wasn't that Yi Li was soft-hearted and wanted to invite them. It was just that although there weren't many people in the area where they were standing, it was still a place where people came and went. Noble consort Liu didn't care about her reputation, but she didn't like to hear that her husband was involved in scandals with other women. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and pulled Yi Li into a room they had booked earlier. When he walked past noble consort Liu gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "I don't need your fake kindness." Yi Li stopped and looked back at her with a faint smile. She sneered, "So, are you coming or not?" Noble consort Liu's pale face suddenly turned pink. She gritted her teeth and followed her. Mo Xiaoyao had never treated his guests well. Of course, he couldn't be blamed for this. Ever since he was young, no matter where he went, he was always warmly entertained by others. The number of people who could be entertained by him could be counted on one hand. As a result, when noble consort Liu and Princess Changle arrived a few steps behind, Mo Xiaoyao had already dismissed the waiter who was waiting for them to order. Unsurprisingly, the dishes he ordered were all things that Yi Li and himself liked to eat. As for Yi Li, because she was very familiar with Hua Tianxiang, she had some understanding of Princess Changle. She had also ordered several dishes that Princess Changle liked to eat. As a result, when the table was filled with dishes, noble consort Liu's expression became even more unsightly. Yi Li looked at the gloomy-faced noble consort Liu, who had only picked a few pieces of vegetables to eat, and felt somewhat puzzled. Even if noble consort Liu didn't order the dishes to her liking, the dishes in this restaurant shouldn't be so bad, right? While Yi Li was feeling puzzled, Mo Xiaoyao had already placed some of her favorite dishes into her bowl. Softly, he said, "The cooking skills of this restaurant's cooks are not bad. Try it." Yi Li lowered her head and tasted a mouthful. Indeed, it was not bad. Although it could not compare to the Prince Ding Mansion's chefs or the Concentrated Fragrance Pavilion's chefs, it was definitely much better than Yi Li's. Yi Li was not a picky eater. She could even eat her own home-cooked dishes, much less this kind of cooking skill. Raising her hand, she placed a piece of chicken, which had been cooked to perfection, in Mo Xiaoyao's bowl, saying, "Try this. It's very tasty." The expression on Mo Xiaoyao's face immediately became even gentler. Although he frowned at the sight of the chicken, he still lowered his head and ate the entire piece of chicken. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's serious appearance as he ate, Yi Li smiled faintly. From time to time, she would place some food into his bowl. Because of his 10 years of illness, Mo Xiaoyao's diet was very simple, and he did not like to eat meat or fish. However, Yi Li believed that although it was necessary to eat more vegetarian dishes, they should be accompanied by meat and vegetables. As a result, from time to time, she would place some meat into Mo Xiaoyao's bowl. Fortunately, although Mo Xiaoyao did not like to eat meat, as long as it was given to him by Yi Li, he would eat it without saying a word. Over the years, he had developed the habit of having Yi Li place food into his bowl when the two of them ate together in private. It was to the point that Yi Li forgot to place food into his bowl while she was eating. By the time she realized, Mo Xiaoyao had already eaten more than half a bowl of white rice. She did not know whether to laugh or cry at a certain someone's childishness. Uncle Prince Ding and Princess Consort have such a good relationship. Princess Changle looked at the two of them, smiling enviously. Although she had seen many married couples, many of whom were deeply in love, Princess Changle still felt that the scene in front of her was beautiful and enviable. In the palace, when her imperial father ate a dish, he would have countless poisons tested. Furthermore, he would have palace maids and eunuchs test the food before he could feel at ease. Under these circumstances, which concubine or child would dare to place food into her imperial father's bowl? At the very least, in Princess Changle's memories, her imperial mother and imperial father had always eaten their own food. Yi Li glanced at her, unhappily saying, "What does a little girl know about relationships? Your uncle Prince Ding is very hard to please. Miss Yi, you clearly know that the prince does not like to eat those things. Why do you deliberately place food into his bowl?" Noble consort Liu, who had been calm all this time, suddenly spoke up. Furthermore, under the gazes of everyone present, she placed some stir-fried green bamboo shoots into Mo Xiaoyao's bowl. Faintly smiling, she said, "I remember that the prince likes to eat green bamboo shoots the most." The side room immediately became quiet, the atmosphere becoming heavy. Originally, Mo Xiaoyao had just put down his chopsticks and was about to drink the mushroom and ginseng chicken soup that Yi Li had served him. Unexpectedly, he saw noble consort Liu place food into his bowl. Immediately, his expression sank. Abandoning the half-drunk soup, he raised his bowl and threw it at noble consort Liu. Noble consort Liu was not a weak woman. As soon as she saw the bowl of soup coming at her, she immediately stepped aside. Unfortunately, the table was not big and the two were not far from each other. Therefore, although she stepped aside, half of her shoulder was still soaked by the chicken soup. The delicate white porcelain bowl hit the wall behind noble consort Liu and broke with a bang. "Prince Ding, you..." Noble consort Liu had never thought that Mo Xiaoyao would treat her so rudely. For a moment, her face turned pale and she could not say a word. Looking at noble consort Liu's embarrassed face, Yi Li did not have any sympathy in her heart. If it were not for the fact that she did not want to be too rude, Yi Li would have directly scolded him. "Do you have any shame? Putting food into someone's bowl," not to mention in this era, even in her previous life, only people who were very close or had a good relationship with each other would do such a thing. Yi Li really didn't know what was going on in noble consort Liu's head. "Get out." Mo Xiaoyao stared at noble consort Liu and said coldly. Chapter 512. You. Embarrassed, noble consort Liu bit her lip, gazing at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao remained unmoved. This time, his words were even more concise. Scram. In the end, she was still a woman. After being treated so heartlessly by Mo Xiaoyao, noble consort Liu finally got up and rushed out of the room. Mo Xiaoyao looked at the bamboo shoots in his bowl with disdain, pushing the bowl to the side. Yi Li silently placed the untouched bowl of chicken soup in his hand. Softly, she said, "Drink some more." Only then did Mo Xiaoyao pick up the bowl of chicken soup and slowly drink 2 mouthfuls. His originally furrowed brows gradually relaxed. Yi Li picked up an untouched bowl from the side and filled it with rice for him. Only then did she pick up her chopsticks and continue eating. Princess Changle looked at the two with a smile and said, "Of course I know that Uncle Prince Ding and Princess have a good relationship. Because if Princess Ding gives Uncle Prince Ding something that he doesn't like, Uncle Prince Ding will eat it all. However, even if someone else gives Uncle Prince Ding his favorite dish, Uncle Prince Ding will smash the bowl. Princess Consort, do you think I'm right?" Mischievous. Yi Li pursed her lips and said with a smile. Originally, Yi Li believed that after the incident at the restaurant, noble consort Liu would hate them to the bone and stay as far away as possible. As a result, the next morning, when they left the tavern and headed out of the city, they coincidentally ran into Prime Minister Liu's entourage. Yi Li's irritation rose to a new height. This was especially true when she saw noble consort Liu approach them with a calm expression, as if nothing had happened. Yi Li was left speechless. Princess Changle, who was following beside noble consort Liu, secretly shrugged her shoulders at Yi Li, squeezing out a mischievous expression. She smiled at Yi Li. The corners of Yi Li's eyes twitched as she swept a glance at noble consort Liu. Princess Changle shook her head slightly, rolling her eyes at the sky. Yi Li could only look up at the sky helplessly. Prince Ding, did you have a good rest last night? Noble consort Liu walked up to Mo Xiaoyao and asked softly. Although her expression was still indifferent, one could hear the genuine concern in her voice. Of her own accord, Princess Changle stopped in her tracks, standing slightly further away from noble consort Liu to admire the scenery. Was her imperial father really as suspicious as her imperial mother said? Then why had imperial father never suspected that his beloved concubine would make him a cuckold and even let her out to pester a married man? Nausea. Mo Xiaoyao said coldly. His silver hair shone faintly in the morning light. He turned around and walked to Yi Li, leaving noble consort Liu, who was still looking at him. Noble consort Liu silently gazed at the departing figure with snow-white hair. A trace of infatuation and sorrow flashed through her eyes. Yi Li turned to look at noble consort Liu. Smiling faintly, she said, "Prime Minister Liu, noble consort, please forgive me. Normally, our prince's temper is not so bad. It is only because he was disgusted at noon yesterday that he lost his appetite last night and this morning that he became like this." Mo Xiaoyao directly picked up Yi Li and placed her on the back of a horse. He then mounted the horse and sat behind Yi Li, raising the reins. He took the lead and left the city. He left behind a group of people with various expressions. Among them, noble consort Liu and Prime Minister Liu's expressions were particularly unsightly. There was no need to mention noble consort Liu. Although Prime Minister Liu was not present yesterday, he knew what had happened at the restaurant. Similarly, he felt that his daughter had gone too far. However, he was similarly displeased with Mo Xiaoyao's merciless behavior in front of so many people. Glancing at noble consort Liu, Prime Minister Liu said in a heavy voice, "Noble consort, it is time for us to set out. Let's go." Noble consort Liu unwillingly glanced at the city gate, where Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao had already disappeared. Finally, she turned around and got on the carriage. Feng Zhiyao and the others who were left behind looked at each other. After a while, Zhuo Jing frowned and said, "Young master, there seems to be something wrong with the Liu family." Xu Qingchen glanced at the carriage that had already set off. The smile on her lips was like a spring breeze, but it made people feel cold. "Something is indeed wrong. I have heard that Prince Ding rode a horse on a slanted bridge and was attracted by many women. I didn't expect that now that he is in the prime of his life, he is even more attractive to women than before." She said it gently and elegantly, but the people who listened to her felt a chill down their spines. Looking at the elegant carriage, Feng Zhiyao wanted to defend his boss and his good friend, but he couldn't. He had to shut his mouth silently. Even the noble consort of Da Chu state was so infatuated. Wasn't this attracting bees and butterflies? Seeing that everyone had tacitly agreed, Xu Qingchen nodded in satisfaction and changed the topic. "What do you think is wrong?" Zhuo Jing thought and then said with a frown, "The emperor sending noble consort Liu to Nanzhao is not right. Also, noble consort Liu is a bit too bold. If noble consort Liu's words and actions reach the emperor's ears, no matter how much the emperor favors her, he will be ruthless." Xu Qingchen nodded and said, "That's right. She is so bold because she is certain that these things will not reach the emperor. Then, this time, there are no emperor's people among the messengers sent by Da Chu state. How is that possible?" Feng Zhiyao said. They had all seen with their own eyes how suspicious Mo Jingqi was. Feng Zhiyao wondered if there was anyone in the world that Mo Jingqi could truly trust. No matter how much he trusted Prime Minister Liu and how much he doted on noble consort Liu, it was impossible for him not to put people around them. Xu Qingchen lowered his head and thought for a while. He said, "Then Mo Jingqi thinks that he put people around them, but in fact, those people are not his people. What does the Liu family want to do?" Feng Zhiyao shook his head. He couldn't understand what young Master Qingchen couldn't figure out. He pulled the horse next to him and jumped on it. "Let's think about it later. If we don't go now, the prince and princess will have to go through Broken Snow Pass. Mo Xiaoyao and his people didn't encounter any difficulties in Broken Snow Pass. They went out of Broken Snow Pass one after another with Prime Minister Liu and his people. After Broken Snow Pass, it was the land of Nanjiang. The people of Nanjiang were tough and good at controlling poisonous animals. They weren't afraid, but they didn't want to get into trouble. They didn't stop on the way. They went straight to the capital of Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao and his people were all riding fast horses, while noble consort Liu and her people were riding in carriages. Therefore, they left them far behind as soon as they went out of Broken Snow Pass. As a result, it was much quieter on the way. In just a few days, they had arrived at the capital of Nanzhao. The capital of Nanzhao was still as prosperous and noisy as it was many years ago. People of different ethnic groups could be seen at the gate of the city. Perhaps it was because of Princess Anxi's wedding. Although there were many remote tribes in Nanjiang that didn't belong to the Nanzhao kingdom, many tribal leaders would come out to give face to Princess Anxi's wedding. Therefore, the Nanzhao kingdom's royal city was much more lively than before. At the same time, there were many more guards inside and outside the city. When Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li arrived, Princess Anxi came out of the city to welcome them in person. As soon as Yi Li jumped off the horse, Princess Anxi came up to them with her people. She said with a smile, "Prince Ding Mansion. I haven't seen you for a long time. You look even better than before." Yi Li said with a smile, "You flatter me, Princess. Congratulations on your wedding." Chapter 513. The smile on Princess Anxi's face faded slightly, but she still accepted Yi Li's congratulations with a smile. She glanced sideways at the young man beside her and said to Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, "Prince Ding, Princess, this is my fiancé, Pur." Yi Li looked up at the young man. He was about the same age as Princess Anxi. He was tall and slender, almost as tall as Mo Xiaoyao. But his skin color was different from the men of the Central Plains. His wheat-colored skin made him look more muscular and handsome. There was a hint of stiffness and undetectable embarrassment on his stiff face. Yi Li instinctively felt that this young man was a simple and honest person. She really didn't think that Princess Anxi would like him. The young man nodded at Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li and said a few words that Yi Li couldn't understand. It didn't sound like the common language of Nanzhao. Mo Xiaoyao nodded at the young man and said a few words. That young man was clearly surprised that this white-clothed man could actually speak his language, and the gaze he looked at Mo Xiaoyao with immediately became much more enthusiastic. Princess Anxi smiled at Yi Li and said, "Pur is the only son of the chief of a tribe in the south. His tribe was on good terms with my grandfather's tribe. I saw him a few times when I was young. But they have their own language and have always been xenophobic. He has just learned Nanzhao language, so I don't think you understand. He just said that you are welcome." The others naturally heard the conversation between Princess Anxi and Yi Li. Pur looked at Princess Anxi and a trace of confusion flashed across his face. Princess Anxi whispered a few words to him. Pur looked up and nodded at Yi Li with a smile. He said in a stiff Nanzhao language, "Welcome." Yi Li listened to the stiff and out-of-tune Nanzhao language. It was even stiffer than hers. It sounded anxious. He had just learned it. He nodded and replied in Nanzhao language, "Thank you. Congratulations." The young man clearly understood Yi Li's words. His expression towards the crowd became gentler as he muttered a few words to Princess Anxi. Princess Anxi said to Yi Li with a smile, "He said you're all my friends. You're very nice." Yi Li couldn't help but smile. She felt that this young man wasn't unworthy of Princess Anxi after all. After they were done exchanging pleasantries, Shu Qingchen and the others caught up with them. Shu Qingchen smiled at Princess Anxi. "Congratulations, Your Highness." A bitter smile flashed across Princess Anxi's eyes. She lowered her eyes and said, "Thank you. Thank you for coming." Shu Qingchen smiled. "I'm also very happy to be able to attend your wedding." Princess Anxi quickly adjusted herself and nodded with a smile. "It's been a few years. I'm glad to see you. This is my fiancé, Pua." Princess Anxi turned her head and introduced Shu Qingchen to Pur in another language. Shu Qingchen wasn't called the first young master of Da Chu state for nothing. In Yi Li's words, if Mo Xiuyao and Shu Qingchen stood together, the first person people would notice would be Mo Xiuyao. But that would be because of Mo Xiuyao's white hair. And the last person people would look at would be Shu Qingchen. Of course, there was no lack of Yi Li's intention to belittle her husband. But at least it showed that Shu Qingchen and Mo Xiuyao wouldn't be inferior to each other when they stood together. In fact, in terms of appearance, Shu Qingchen might not be more handsome than Feng Zhiyao. He wasn't as handsome as Han Mingxi either. He didn't even care much about his clothes and accessories. His clothes were white clothes of the most common color and style. He also did not like to be like Feng Zhiyao, who was always holding a gorgeous gold-plated folding fan in his hand. Occasionally, he would just hold a folding fan that he had casually drawn in his study. On his waist hung a jade pendant that his grandfather had given him when he was young. It hadn't been changed for many years. But as long as he stood in front of people, people couldn't help but look at him. They were reluctant to look away. Shu Qingchen always gave people a feeling of elegance and refinement, but he didn't have the high and mighty aura of an immortal. Instead, it was a kind of feeling that made people involuntarily submit and feel warm and comfortable. Most of the outstanding men in the world were too threatening compared to Shu Qingchen. People couldn't help but be wary and alienated. Only Shu Qingchen. Even Yi Li had never seen a man like Shu Qingchen who made people want to get close to him and feel warm and peaceful. Even people who knew Shu Qingchen's methods couldn't help but be attracted to him. Pu Er was startled when he saw Shu Qingchen. A trace of surprise flashed through his eyes, but there was also relief and sadness. He nodded at Shu Qingchen and also said welcome. He didn't know much Nanjiao language. Shu Qingchen smiled gently and greeted him in Pu's tribal language. It was the same tribal language, but Mo Xiuyao's pronunciation was very similar to Princess Anxi's. It should be the standard language learned by outsiders. But when it came from Shu Qingchen's mouth, it seemed to be different. It was more like Pu's, but his voice was more pleasant. Seeing the faint sadness on the young man's face, Yi Li couldn't help but lean her head on Mo Xiuyao's shoulder. She didn't want to look up. Brother, can you be any worse? It's fine if you don't like Princess Anxi, but now you're attacking her fiancé? Li, are you tired? Mo Xiuyao asked with concern. He didn't care who Shu Qingchen attacked, but he couldn't attack him anyway. Yi Li nodded weakly. She sympathized with the gloomy young man standing next to Shu Qingchen. Princess Anxi looked at Yi Li and Mo Xiuyao holding hands, and a trace of envy flashed through her eyes. She said with a smile, "Let's just talk here. Let's go into the city. I've already asked people to prepare a post house. If we continue to stand here, we might steal the souls of the girls in Nanjiao City. Then we'll be in trouble." Princess Anxi was right. Although they weren't standing in the center of the city gate, they were too eye-catching. From Mo Xiuyao and Shu Qingchen to Feng Zhiyao, Zhuo Jing, Lin Han and Qin Feng, any one of them was enough to attract a large number of girls. At this time, there were already many young girls standing at the city gate. The people of Nanjiang were always enthusiastic. If it weren't for the guards of Wangcheng, they might have already rushed forward to express their love. After entering the city, Princess Anxi led them directly to a post house not far from the palace and the princess's residence. Mo Xiuyao and the others were tired from the journey. Naturally, they wouldn't go to the palace to see the king of Nanjiao as soon as they entered the city. Princess Anxi personally led them to a courtyard in the post house that had already been prepared. She ordered the servants of the post house to take good care of them. Seeing Princess Anxi put in so much effort, Yi Li felt even more embarrassed about her brother's unkindness. Receiving Yi Li's apology, Princess Anxi smiled helplessly. She looked back at Pu who was talking to Mo Xiuyao and Shu Qingchen not far away. Mo Xiuyao and Shu Qingchen were both proficient in many Nanjiang languages, so they didn't have any language barriers when talking to Pu. From Yi Li's perspective, the three of them were chatting quite well. However, the young man sandwiched between Mo Xiuyao and Shu Qingchen was even more inconspicuous. Princess Anxi sighed helplessly. Prince Ding and Qingchen are both too outstanding. It's really difficult to find someone as outstanding as them. Pur and I have known each other since we were young. He's not a bad person and has always been good to me. There's nothing wrong with marrying him. Chapter 5:14. Yi Li nodded and said, "Your Highness made the right choice." From Pua's behavior and expression, it was obvious that he valued Princess Anshi very much. More importantly, he obviously knew that Princess Anshi was in love with Shu Qingchen, but there was only a trace of sadness and admiration in his eyes when he looked at Shu Qingchen. There wasn't a trace of jealousy or hatred in his eyes, which showed that he was a broad-minded person. Princess Anshi was the crown princess of Nanzhao, the future king of Nanzhao. If Shu Qingchen was from Nanzhao and loved her deeply, they would be a perfect match. However, although Shu Qingchen liked to travel around when he was young, he would inevitably return to his family in the end. Princess Anshi, as the crown princess, could not leave Nanzhao and follow Shu Qingchen back to the Shu family. Young Master Shu's literary talent was outstanding. He would not be comfortable staying in a place like Nanzhao for the rest of his life. More importantly, Shu Qingchen looked warm and approachable, but in fact, he was indifferent and distant. Unless it was someone he cared about, he would protect them. However, he was very cold to those he did not care about. Most of the time, when you are still immersed in his warmth like a spring breeze, he is already thousands of miles away from you. Yi Li thought that even if Princess Anshi married Mo Xiaoyao, she would not necessarily be happier than if she married Pua. The one who was loved would always be happier than the one who was loved. Of course, it would be better if she was loved and loved at the same time. Princess Anshi looked at Yi Li and said with a smile, "Actually, I envy Princess Ding the most. I'm afraid that all the women in the world envy Princess Ding." Yi Li looked back at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao also looked back at her. The two of them looked at each other and couldn't help but smile. A faint warmth spread between the two of them. Yi Li looked back at Princess Anshi and said with a smile, "Your Highness can be like me. Pua will be a good husband." Looking at Princess Anshi, Yi Li reached out to hold her hand and said sincerely, "Since you've made up your mind, let go of the past and make good use of it." There was a saying in the Central Plains, if there are flowers to be plucked, they must be plucked straight. If there are no flowers left, the branches will be empty. Although it wasn't appropriate to use it here, it still made some sense. Pua was interested in the princess. Since the princess had chosen him, she must have believed in him. In that case, why not manage this marriage well? The human heart was made of flesh. If he waited until the human heart turned cold, it would be too late for regrets. Prince and I had only met once or twice before we got married. You guys are much better than us, aren't you? Princess Anshi nodded and said, "I understand. Ding Wangfei, thank you." Yi Li shook her head and glanced at the elegant young Master Qing Chen. She raised her eyebrows and said, "As for that person, don't take him too seriously. Eldest aunt scolded him every day at home. Who knows how many girls in Glass City he ignored? I estimate that at least half of the girls in Glass City are cursing him every day." Princess Anshi was interested and asked curiously, "Cursing him for what?" Yi Li said with a smile, "Not cursing him for not being able to find a wife in this lifetime. Probably cursing him for falling in love with a girl one day but being ignored by her. Anyway, if I was a girl and was ignored like that, I would curse him like that." Princess Anshi finally couldn't help but laugh. The sadness between her eyebrows dissipated. She said with a smile, "It's too sad to not be able to find a wife in this lifetime. Just curse him for falling in love with a girl and being ignored by her." Seeing the smile and relief in Princess Anshi's eyes, Yi Li felt relieved. No matter what, it was good to let it go. After sending off Princess Anshi, Shu Qingchen turned to look at Yi Li and said sincerely, "Li, Big brother thanks you." Shu Qingchen understood why Yi Li had said so much to Princess Anshi. She didn't have much of a relationship with Princess Anshi, so she didn't need to spend so much effort. Yi Li did all this because she didn't want Princess Anshi to be unable to let go and hate Shu Qingchen. If she was an ordinary girl, it wouldn't be a big deal. But Princess Anshi was the daughter of the crown prince. She had too much power. If she really took advantage of a blind spot, it might give Shu Qingchen a headache for a while. Moreover, although Shu Qingchen didn't have any romantic feelings for Princess Anxi, he did treat her as a friend. It would be a pity if their friendship was affected because of this. Yi Li rolled her eyes and pursed her lips. No need to thank me. Big brother, since you don't have any feelings for other girls, then don't provoke them. I can't be your shield all the time. Speaking of this, Yi Li couldn't help but be glad that she had married Mo Xiaoyao long ago and that they were publicly acknowledged as a loving couple. Every time she walked with Shu Qingchen, she would be glared at by many girls who didn't know the truth. Thinking of how she had lied to Princess Anxi that she was Shu Qingchen's fiancé, Yi Li couldn't help but be glad that she had met Princess Anxi. If she had met another girl, she might have pulled out a knife and stabbed her. Shu Qingchen touched his nose apologetically and didn't know what to say. He really didn't want to provoke any girl, and it wasn't that he was arrogant and looked down on anyone. It was just that he didn't have that kind of feeling. Li, I told you long ago that Big Brother won't like any girl. Mo Xiaoyao walked out and put an arm around Yi Li's waist and pulled her into his arms with a smile. Yi Li immediately recalled what Mo Xiaoyao had said about Shu Qingchen's sexual orientation and her face stiffened. She turned to look at Shu Qingchen and saw that he didn't have any intention of refuting. Her heart sank again. Although she didn't discriminate against homosexuals, she still wasn't prepared for her big brother to really become a homosexual. Moreover, how was she going to explain this to eldest uncle and eldest aunt? Shu Qingchen saw Yi Li's gloomy expression and thought that she was worried about him. He hurriedly said, Li, don't be angry. Big brother didn't want to do this kind of thing. Seeing Shu Qingchen's rare worried expression, Yi Li's heart skipped a beat. That's right, Big brother didn't want to be a homosexual either. Big brother didn't say anything for so many years. He probably didn't want others to know. Young Master Qingchen was famous, but if word got out that he was a homosexual, I understand. Big brother, don't be troubled. Leah won't ask about it in the future. Shu Qingchen was stunned. He was touched by his sister's understanding, but for some reason, he felt that there was something wrong with the way Leah looked at him. What was with that look of understanding, sympathy, and comfort? We've been on the road for a few days. Everyone must be tired. Big brother, I'll take Li back to her room to rest first, Mo Xiaoyao said slowly. Shu Qingchen, who still felt that something was wrong, waved his hand to let the two of them do as they pleased. He replayed the conversation in his mind and finally found where the problem was. Young Master Qingchen's gentle and refined elegance finally cracked. His face was so pale that it almost scared Xue Jing and Lin Han, who were about to leave the courtyard. Mo Xiaoyao. What did he mean by he wouldn't like any girl? Mo Xiaoyao, that bastard, was clearly hinting that he didn't like girls. Shu Qingchen finally found the reason why Leah had been looking at him strangely a few days ago. Thinking of the half-smile Mo Xiaoyao gave him before he left, young Master Qingchen couldn't help but grit his teeth. Mo Xiaoyao, just you wait. Chapter 5:15. When they returned to their temporary residence, Yi Li asked curiously, which tribe does Princess Anxi's husband belong to? You and my brother both know their language. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. It's a tribe called the White Wolf tribe in the southwest of Nanjiang. They live deep in the mountains and have been living with ferocious beasts and poisonous insects since childhood. Almost all the men in the clan were the best hunters and archers in the world. Besides, they are as good at controlling poisonous insects as the other Nanjiang people, maybe even better. When we were preparing to pacify Nanjiang, I had people investigate them and found that some of the soldiers had learned this language. I only learned it because I had nothing better to do. Yi Li sat down and poured tea for herself while thinking, Princess Anxi chose this time to get married because she wants the support of the White Wolf tribe. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and sat down opposite Yi Li. Before they came to Nanjiang, they had sent people to investigate Princess Anxi's marriage. Mo Xiaoyao said, the current situation in Nanjiang is very unfavorable for Princess Anxi. Princess Anxi needs the support of other tribes in Nanjiang. It was better when Big Brother was in the south, But he has been busy in the northwest these years. Princess Anshi has to deal with her father, Shu Manlin, Tan Jiji, and the leaders of the tribes by herself. I'm afraid it's not easy. Then, Yi Li frowned and said worriedly, although they should help Princess Anshi based on their friendship with her, they didn't want to help her. However, in terms of the stability between countries, a chaotic southern border was the most beneficial to them. Let's try not to get involved. Shu Qingchen's voice came from outside the door. Young Master Qingchen, who had regained his elegance and gentleness, walked in. When he saw Mo Xiaoyao, he narrowed his eyes. He looked at Yi Li and said, my friendship with Princess Anshi is one thing, but getting involved in the internal affairs of other countries is another. In the past, I was just a friend of Princess Anshi, but now our words and deeds represent the Northwest. Therefore, we cannot make any mistakes. Yi Li nodded and asked worriedly, will it make things difficult for Big Brother? Shu Qingchen shook his head. Princess Anshi knows her limits. Yi Li thought for a moment and said, to be honest, Princess Anshi may be talented in governing a country, but in terms of scheming, I'm afraid Princess Anshi is no match for those people. If we stand by and do nothing, once Princess Anshi is defeated and southern Jiang falls into Shu Manlin's hands, it won't be good for the Northwest. Shu Qingchen fell silent for a moment and said, I'll talk to Princess Anshi later. We can help them in secret, but we can't stand on either side openly. The affairs of Nanjiang have nothing to do with us. Yi Li nodded and said, I understand. Looking at Shu Qingchen's calm and graceful manner, Yi Li sighed in her heart. Sometimes, her brother was so rational that it was heartless. Perhaps in his heart, Princess Anshi was not as important as his family, even though she was his friend. After all, the Northwest was their home. After all, they were guests from afar. The next morning, Yi Li and the others went to the palace to see the king of Nanzhao. As before, Princess Anshi personally accompanied him to the palace. After yesterday's meeting and conversation, Pu was much more familiar and friendly when he saw them again. The young man also greeted them in the language he was used to. Even though she had been to Nanzhao before, this was the first time Yi Li had seen the king of Nanzhao. The king of Nanzhao wore a robe made of brocade and embroidery unique to Nanzhao. His entire person was resplendent. On his head was a magnificent crown made of gold and inlaid with emeralds and jade. His entire person was so dazzling that it was almost blinding. The entire palace was filled with a magnificent style that was completely different from the Central Plains. Prince Ding and Princess Ding have come from afar. I don't welcome them. Did Prince Ding and Princess rest well last night? The king of Nanzhao sat on the throne and laughed heartily. But there was no welcome in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes. The king of Nanzhao's Central Plains language was very good, but he had a slight Nanzhao accent. This was a problem that many Nanzhao people had, but it did not affect the listener's understanding. Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and raised his hands in return. He said, the crown princess's wedding is near. I and Princess Consort congratulate the king and princess of Nanzhao. We also wish that the king of Nanzhao will have a grandson soon. The king of Nanzhao's expression froze. Even though there was nothing wrong with Mo Xiaoyao's congratulatory speech, the king of Nanzhao was not yet 50 years old. Mo Xiaoyao said that he wished him a grandson soon. It sounded normal, but in the king of Nanzhao's ears, it seemed to be mocking him for not being able to have a son. Even His Highness Prince Ding has come from afar. The crown princess really has a lot of face. I really envy her. The atmosphere in hall I was subtly stiff. Suddenly, a seductive female voice came from the side hall. Everyone looked to the side. Shu Manlin was dressed in the gorgeous yellow robes of the Saintess of Nanjiang. But she did not wear the mask that the Saintess of Nanjiang wore to receive outsiders. The other Nanzhao people in the hall seemed to be used to this. Mo Xiaoyao's gaze slowly swept across Shu Manlin. He frowned and said in confusion, King of Nanzhao, this is? The king of Nanzhao laughed and looked lovingly at Shu Manlin. He said, Prince Ding does not know. This is the saintess of my Nanzhao kingdom, Shu Manlin. Mo Xiaoyao's frown deepened. He said coolly, I heard that the Saintess of Nanjiang cannot be more than 25 years old and never sees outsiders. So this is just a rumor. A trace of anger flashed across Xu Manlin's face. Was Mo Xiaoyao saying that she looked more than 25 years old? But Xu Manlin had been locked up by Mo Xiaoyao for more than half a year. She still had some lingering fear of him. Even in front of so many people, she did not want to take the initiative to provoke him. She could only look pitifully at the king of Nanjiao. At least on the surface, the king of Nanjiao did treat Xu Manlin much better than Princess Anxi, who was the princess and the crown princess. Seeing Xu Manlin's pleading eyes, the king of Nanjiao immediately helped her out. Prince Ding does not know. The Saintess is the great savior of Nanjiao. So after discussion among the chiefs of the tribes, the Saintess Xu Manlin will become the Saintess of Nanjiao for life. Yi Li glanced at Xu Manlin's slightly proud face and smiled in her heart. She did not know if Xu Manlin was the savior of Nanjiao. But based on her relationship with Tan Jiji, she looked more like the bane of Nanjiao. To be able to persuade so many chiefs of the tribes of Nanjiao to agree that Xu Manlin did not have to abide by the rules of Nanjiang for hundreds of years, it was clear that their power in Nanjiang was not to be underestimated. It was no wonder that Princess Anxi chose to marry Pur at this time. Pur's tribe was also a very powerful tribe in Nanjiang. Coupled with the support of Princess Anxi's grandfather's tribe, they could barely compete with Xu Manlin and Tan Jiji. Mo Xiaoyao nodded indifferently. A trace of anger flashed across Xu Manlin's eyes. She turned and looked at Xu Qingchen. After a slight pause, Xu Manlin stepped forward and smiled softly. Is this the first young master of Da Chu State, young master Qingchen? It's a pleasure to meet you. Xu Manlin greets you. Princess Anxi looked at her indifferently and sneered. It's not your first time seeing Qingchen. Why are you so pretentious? This woman had trapped Qingchen in the underground palace of Nanjiao for many days. Now she was pretending to be meeting him for the first time. How evil. Xu Manlin looked at Princess Anxi and blinked innocently. Your Highness, what do you mean? When did I meet young Master Qingchen? But you. I heard that Princess Anxi and young Master Qingchen are very good friends. Xu Manlin emphasized the word very good. It seemed to be full of jealousy and resentment, but it also seemed to be intentional. Because she was speaking in the language of Nanjiao, she deliberately glanced at Pur, who was standing beside Princess Anxi. It was even more intentional. Princess Anxi's eyes flashed with a sharp light. She looked at Xu Manlin coldly and said, So what if I'm friends with young Master Qingchen? I'm the crown princess of Nanjiao. Can't I even make friends with one person? But someone has been fooling around with King Li of Da Chu State for many years. At that time, someone hadn't received the privileges of the tribes of Nanjiang yet, right? No matter how bold Xu Manlin was, she couldn't help but blush when Princess Anxi said that in front of so many people. You. Princess Anxi smiled disdainfully. What? Holy Maiden, are you saying that you don't know King Li of Da Chu State? Princess Anxi dared to ask this because she had evidence that Xu Manlin had known Mo Jingli for a long time. Xu Manlin couldn't deny or admit it. If she denied it, Princess Anxi might throw out the evidence of her relationship with Prince Li in a fit of anger. If she admitted it, it would be worse. Although she was no longer restricted by these restrictions, it would be very disadvantageous for her if people found out that she had been acquainted with a man outside for years. That's enough, Why are you saying this in front of the guests? The king of Nanjiao suddenly spoke. He frowned and looked at Princess Anxi. There was a hint of reprimand in his tone. Princess Anxi was startled and finally lowered her head sadly. Yi Li smiled at the smug look that flashed across Xu Manlin's face. She suddenly pursed her lips and said with a smile, speaking of which, I also feel that the Holy Maiden looks familiar. Xu Manlin looked at Yi Li in surprise. Her eyes were filled with nervousness and reproach. She seemed to be blaming Yi Li for betraying her. Yi Li smiled faintly. She thought seriously and said, Maybe I was mistaken. 5 years ago, when Quan was 1 month old, I seem to have seen a girl who looked very similar to the Holy Maiden follow a man to the northwest to play. But that man wasn't King Li of Da Chu State. This consort must have misjudged him. Yi Li's words scared Shu Manlin. She knew that she had been tricked by Yi Li. She was furious but didn't dare to show it in front of everyone. She could only swallow her anger and say with a forced smile, "It's good that you recognized her. My daughter has never been to the northwest." Yi Li smiled faintly and said, "What? I've also never seen two people who look so alike. Holy Maiden, please don't blame me." Chapter 5:16. Mo Xiuyao's group was the first group of people to come to the wedding because they had the intention of having fun in the south this time. But there was nothing to have fun in Nanjiao Imperial City other than the frequent interactions between the different races. Mo Xiuyao saw that there were still a few days until Princess Anchi's wedding, so he took Yi Li to other places in Nanjiao to have fun. Because Mo Xiuyao had the intention of throwing away the other eyesores and only taking Yi Li to have fun, before the third watch, he took Yi Li out of the post house and out of the city. With Mo Xiuyao's martial arts, no one would be able to detect him if he wanted to avoid someone. So when the other people in the post house found that the prince and princess consort were not present, they only saw a note on the table that said, "Return in a few days, do not miss." Then they understood that the prince had taken princess consort to travel. Unable to find the two, the people could only wait in the city. With the prince and princess consort's abilities, there was probably no one in Nanjiang that could make things difficult for them. On the other hand, after Mo Xiuyao and Yi Li left Nanjiao Royal City, they did not have a purpose and were just wandering around. They saw beautiful scenery and stayed to enjoy it. It was a rare moment of leisure in the past few years. One day, the two caught two wild horses in a forest. In a moment of excitement, they had a horse race. The wild horses they had just caught were not very obedient. Yi Li rode the wild horse and ran wildly through the forest. Mo Xiuyao's horse riding skills were better and he rode his own horse to follow. When the wild horse finally had enough fun, it listened to Yi Li and slowed down. Mo Xiuyao rode his horse to catch up from behind. He stared harshly at Yi Li's horse and wanted to tear it to pieces. Although this wild horse had a wild personality, it still had some intelligence. When it sensed Mo Xiuyao's killing intent, it immediately moved its feet uneasily, but it didn't dare to run around anymore. Yi Li jumped off the horse's back and said with a smile, "You don't have to be angry. This horse hasn't been completely tamed yet. If it is so obedient, it will be at a disadvantage." Mo Xiuyao knew that most BMWs were arrogant, but when it came to Li Li's safety, a BMW was nothing. If it weren't for the fact that he was worried about hurting Mr. Li, he would have cut down the wild horse that was running wildly with his sword. Seeing Mo Xiuyao's gloomy expression as he stared at the wild horse, Yi Li couldn't help but smile. She pulled Mo Xiuyao to stop him from looking at the pitiful horse that looked like it wanted to run away but didn't dare to. Looking at the surrounding lush forest and grassland, the ground was also covered with pink, light blue, white, and yellow wildflowers. At a glance, there was no end in sight. It was like a huge green carpet covered with fresh flowers. So beautiful, Xiuyao, where is this place? Whether it was in the northwest or in the Chu capital, Yi Li had never seen such a fresh and natural beauty. Mo Xiuyao looked around and said with a slight frown, "That wild horse has been running for almost 4 hours. Adding on our previous sightseeing, this place should be 500 or 600 li away from Nanjiao Imperial City. This place should be near the sacred land of Nanjiang." Ahem. Yi Li was a little surprised. The sacred land of Nanjiang was a mysterious place even to the people of Nanjiang. However, the Prince Ding mansion had the intention of pacifying Nanjiang many years ago and naturally would have investigated it, so it wasn't too surprising. Mo Xiuyao pulled Yi Li forward and said, "Since we're here, let's go take a look." Yi Li frowned and said, "Isn't it bad to trespass on the sacred land of Nanjiang? If the people of Nanjiao knew that Prince Ding and Princess Ding had trespassed on the sacred land of Nanjiang, not only would it affect them negatively, Princess Anchi would also lose face." Mo Xiuyao said lightly, "If we're not discovered, it's not trespassing. I promised Shenyang to bring back a few stalks of nethernet flower for him." Yi Li was also very grateful to Shenyang. Not only because he gave up his reputation as a genius doctor and stayed in the Prince Ding mansion for more than 10 years to work on Mo Xiaoyao's poison, but also because Mo Xiaobao was a little weak when he was born. It was all thanks to Shen Yang that he was able to grow up to be so lively today. Hearing that it was something Shen Yang wanted, Yi Li was naturally duty-bound. Moreover, she was also very interested in the so-called sacred land of Nanjiang. Mo Xiaoyao obviously had the potential to be a special forces soldier. His sense of direction was so good that even Yi Li couldn't help but be jealous. Pulling Yi Li without hesitation, he shuttled through the mountain forest. In less than 2 hours, they arrived at the periphery of the sacred land of Nanjiang. The two nimbly avoided the guards and quickly entered the entrance of the sacred land. Perhaps because it had not been invaded by outsiders for hundreds of years, the guards in the sacred land were not very strict. The two only spent a little effort to sneak in. As soon as they entered, they were greeted by a large blood-red sea of flowers. It was a pure red without any impurities. It almost dyed the entire valley red, looking strange and bloody. This is... Yi Li looked at the fiery red in front of her and frowned. Mo Xiaoyao's expression was calm as he said in a deep voice, "This is the hidden luo flower." Yi Li sighed and said softly, "When I heard that the hidden luo flower was a sacred item of Nanjiang, I wanted to bring some back to see if it would be useful to you. Fortunately, I didn't waste time." Mo Xiaoyao didn't understand. "Li knows this flower?" Yi Li said, "There are so many of them. They don't look like rare holy objects, do they? I know that this flower has another name. It's called the red spider lily or the red spider lily. It also has another name, red flower stone garlic." If it wasn't for the blue fallen flower that diverted her attention, Yi Li might have really entered the sacred land of Nanjiang to look for the hidden luo flower. If at that time she saw that the hidden luo flower was actually the common red flower stone garlic, she would really want to cry. Red spider lily, a Buddhist name, one of the 4 flowers of the heavenly realm. Mo Xiaoyao said. Yi Li sat beside Mo Xiaoyao casually. After her eyes got used to the blood red that covered the sky, she looked quite good. She laughed softly. It is indeed a Buddhist name. Legend has it that the red spider lily is the yellow spring flower that grows beside the river of forgetfulness, the only scenery on the road to the yellow spring. Mo Xiaoyao didn't know much about Buddhist scriptures, so he didn't understand. Why is it called the red spider lily? Yi Li recited softly, "The flower blooms without leaves, the leaves without flowers. The red spider lily blooms for 1,000 years, wilts for 1,000 years, the petals and leaves never meet. Love is not cause and effect, fate determines life and death." Mo Xiaoyao frowned and said in a deep voice, "I don't like these words." Yi Li pursed her lips and looked at him with a faint smile, "I don't like it either. This flower does have some detoxification properties, but it's also poisonous. But it's not considered rare. It's just that right now, other than here, there shouldn't be anyone who would cultivate it on such a large scale. Even if there aren't many in the Jiangnan area, we should be able to find quite a few if we look carefully. Are we going to pick them from here and bring them back to Mr. Shen?" Mo Xiaoyao glanced at the large patch of blood red below and said, "Since we're here, let's take some back. Later, we'll go to Jiangnan to pick some and see if there's any difference." Yi Li nodded indifferently. There were so many in the sacred land of Nanjiang. Not to mention picking a few stalks, even if they pulled out a sack and took it away, no one would notice. Chapter 5:17. After picking a few spider lilies and putting them away, the two continued to walk deeper into the forest. But strangely, it seemed that the deeper they went, the fewer guards there were. As they walked further in, the red flowers that filled the sky seemed to gradually lessen. What entered their eyes was another type of flower. It was a gorgeous ball-shaped flower. There were red, pink, white, blue, and yellow. It was dazzling and made people forget their worries when they saw it. Yi Li's eyes tightened as she stared at the sea of flowers in front of her. Mo Xiaoyao lowered his head and asked softly, "Li, what's wrong?" Yi Li raised her head and took out the spider lilies that she had just picked. She pointed at the sea of flowers in front of her and said, "Xiaoyao, We must have made a mistake. That should be the hidden luo flower. Mo Xiaoyao was startled. What do you mean? Yi Li said in a low voice, it's best if I'm wrong. If the Nanjiao people only grow these flowers for ornamental purposes, then it's fine. If there are other uses? Mo Xiaoyao asked, is there something wrong with these flowers? Yi Li said softly, these words sound very beautiful, but if they were used on the evil path, the consequences would be unbearable. These flowers can be made into the best painkillers. Mo Xiaoyao didn't understand, isn't that very good? Nowadays, the painkillers used by the various countries were none other than the numbing powder. But the formula was troublesome and the ingredients were not common. On the battlefield, only high-ranking generals could use them. Normal soldiers could only endure the pain and die from the pain. Yi Li shook her head, because if you're not careful, you can become addicted. It's very difficult to quit. If you use it for a long time, you will become weak and wither. Once it's broken, you will go crazy with pain. It can be said to be the best medicine for controlling puppets. It's more effective than any poison. Once this thing spreads, it wouldn't be strange if it could destroy an entire country. Mo Xiaoyao stared at the sea of flowers in front of him, deep in thought. After a while, he looked up at Yi Li and smiled, although I don't know how Li Li knows all this, but I trust Li Li. Let's go inside and take a look. Seeing the white-haired man holding her hand and walking forward, Yi Li's heart skipped a beat. She had never put up her guard in front of Mo Xiaoyao. If it was said that at the beginning, it was said that he was testing her, but later on, he gradually got used to it. She was used to Mo Xiaoyao's seemingly endless tolerance. She had revealed a lot of things that she shouldn't have known, but Mo Xiaoyao had never asked her about them. Sometimes, he would even help her smooth things over. Perhaps, she finally understood why Mo Xiaoyao had always been so uneasy. After turning around the valley, what entered their eyes was still a seemingly boundless sea of flowers. After walking for a long time, they finally saw a magnificent palace at the end of the valley. There's someone here. Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li into his arms and hid behind a pile of rocks. Sure enough, not long after, they heard voices coming from afar. That voice was very familiar to Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li. The thing I want, have you prepared it? A cold male voice came from not far away. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li looked at each other, then looked at the man who was walking over with a few women dressed in southern border clothing. It was Mo Jingli. Standing beside Mo Jingli was the beautiful southern border princess Shi Xia. These past few years, Mo Jingli had been very good to her. Even though she was a few years older than Yi Ying, she still looked charming and beautiful. Standing in front of them was an old madam in her 50s, holding a sinister-looking snake-headed cane in her hand. Looking at Mo Jingli, she smiled and said, Prince Li, don't worry. All the doctors in our holy land have worked together for so many years and have finally developed the divine medicine that Prince Li wants. I guarantee that the effects will be better than what Prince Li wants. Mo Jingli said coldly, is that so? Then I will wait and see. I hope Elder won't disappoint. The elder smiled confidently and said, of course. Since it's a cooperation, we naturally have to satisfy both sides. As long as Prince Li keeps his promise, it's fine. Men, bring the medicine men here. Not long after, a few disheveled people were dragged over. From Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li's position, they couldn't see them clearly, but they could see a person's figure and appearance. He should be from the Central Plains. That person's eyes were cloudy and unfocused, and his face was sallow and emaciated, as if he had no strength. His expression was sluggish, and his mouth was dripping with saliva. He looked like an idiot born with dementia. The elder smiled and said, what does Prince Li think? In order to guarantee the efficacy of the medicine, we have specially found a few people from Da Chu State to be the medicine men. Mo Jingli carefully observed the medicine men, and seemed very satisfied. He asked, not bad, how long have these people been fed the medicine? The elder smiled and said, less than a month. Mo Jingli was even more satisfied. Very good. I agree to what you have proposed. The elder was even more satisfied. He smiled and said, Prince Li is indeed straightforward. The Holy Maiden will definitely be very grateful to your Highness Prince Li. Mo Jingli snorted and said indifferently, we each took what we needed. Give it to I still have to rush to Nanjiao Kingdom. The elder didn't hesitate. He took out 2 porcelain bottles and handed them to Mo Jingli. He said, this is 3 months' worth of medicine. It's enough for Prince Li to use. It's not easy to take medicine and refine it. Our valley's doctors have only refined this much after so long. Mo Jingli put it away and said, many thanks, elder. I will take my leave. The elder smiled and said, I'll have people escort Prince Li out of the valley. After Mo Jingli left with Princess Xixia, the girl following the elder asked, Elder, who did Prince Li ask for this medicine for? The elder sneered and said, who else could it be for? These people from the Central Plains have always been incomparably vicious. They won't even let their own blood relatives go. I don't know what kind of deep hatred the Emperor of Dachu State has with Prince Li that he would torture his own brother like this. You girls shouldn't get too involved with the people of the Central Plains. If one day you get harmed by them, you won't even be able to cry. The girls giggled. We're not afraid of those people from the Central Plains. We'll use poisonous snakes to bite them to death. Otherwise, we'll imitate Prince Li and give them some Nepenthes powder. Let's see if they'll still be obedient. The elder smiled as he reprimanded the girls. At the same time, he led his people into the palace. Outside the palace, the voices gradually faded away. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li stood behind the pile of rocks and turned their gazes to the beautiful sea of flowers. Nepenthes powder. Mo Jingli gave it to Mo Jingqi. Yi Li sighed softly and said, Mo Jingli's move is really vicious. If Mo Jingqi really fell for it, his life would be ruined. Look at those people just now. A month ago, they were definitely normal and healthy people. What plans does Li have? Mo Xiaoyao asked in a low voice. Yi Li looked at the grand palace in front of her and said in a low voice, let's go in and take a look. Mo Xiaoyao nodded. He picked up Yi Li and jumped onto the roof of the palace. When they landed, there was no sound at all. Even the guards outside the palace did not hear anything. The two quietly landed. Yi Li frowned and said with some confusion, the sacred land of Nanjiang should be a very tight place. Why is it that the guards on our way here are so lax? Mo Xiaoyao thought for a moment and said, in this place, the experts have probably all left by now. Yi Li's heart jumped. You're talking about Nanjiao Imperial City? Mo Xiaoyao nodded. If the secret of the sacred land of Nanjiang is this hidden luo flower, then it is not that important whether there are experts guarding it or not. I'm afraid that even if someone really enters the valley, they may not be able to find the hidden luo flower. The hidden luo flower was the legendary sacred land of Nanjiang. No one would think that the sacred land of Nanjiang could grow all over the place. And even if a few of them were taken away, it would not have much of an impact on the sacred land of Nanjiang. It seems that Xu Manlin and Tan Jiji's plans in Nanjiao Imperial City are not small. We should go back early, in case Big Brother and the others worry. Leaning in Mo Xiaoyao's arms and waiting for the patrolling guards to pass, Yi Li said in a low voice. To see his beloved wife so concerned about Xu Qingchen, even if he knew that they were only siblings, Mo Xiaoyao could not help but feel jealous. He curled his lips and said, young Master Qingchen's wisdom is unparalleled. What is there to worry about? Yi Li reached out and pinched him. She said helplessly, how did Big Brother provoke you? Don't think that I don't know that you deliberately misled Big Brother into thinking that Big Brother likes men. Mo Xiaoyao snorted softly and muttered in a low voice, I'm only speaking the truth. Li, you also want to blame me. Li, you're really biased. When a man was childish, he could have no bottom line. This was the experience that Mo Xiaoyao had given him in the past few years. Yi Li rolled her eyes. She was too lazy to bother with him. She carefully walked forward. Who are you? Since you're here, why don't you show yourself? Suddenly, an old voice came from the palace. Yi Li cursed in her heart, but her body did not move at all. Even her breathing quietly slowed down a lot. Mo Xiaoyao quietly approached her and shook his head at her. Yi Li raised her eyebrows and looked around. They had hidden well along the way. It was reasonable to say that they were in the palace, and even if the palace was behind them, it should be impossible to find them. The palace was quiet for a while. The old voice sounded again, but with a bit of anger. You trespassed into my sacred land of Nanjiang. Do you want me to personally come and invite you out? On the roof opposite, a black shadow flew down and laughed loudly. I'm Lei Tongfeng of Shilling. Please forgive me for disturbing you. The person in the palace snorted and said, so it's the Crown Prince of Genom of Gojosian. I was wondering who had the guts to trespass into my sacred land of Nanjiang. Lei Tongfeng smiled and said, I trespassed here because I had no choice. Please forgive me. I really have something to ask of you. Please allow me to see you. They hadn't seen each other for a few years, but Lei Tongfeng was a lot more mature and steady than he was 5 years ago. With a few words, the anger of the people in the hall lessened by quite a bit. The Crown Prince of the Zhennan King actually has a request for this seat. It's really rare. Come in, let me hear. Lei Tongfeng smiled and said, of course it's a matter of mutual benefit. I wouldn't dare to let you suffer a loss. Yi Li leaned in Mo Xiuyao's arms and quietly pointed at Lei Tongfeng in the courtyard opposite the palace. Mo Xiuyao nodded. After seeing Lei Tongfeng enter, he let go of Yi Li. With a tap of his foot, a swan goose silently landed on the roof of the main palace. Chapter 518. Mo Xiuyao leaned against the roof of the main hall. With his skills, he did not need to remove the glazed tiles to be able to hear the conversation inside. Naturally, he did not need to worry that the people below would discover him. Yi Li knew that her qinggong was not good enough, so she did not go over to join in the fun. She just sat there and waited for Mo Xiuyao. In less than a quarter of an hour, Mo Xiuyao quickly came back. He pulled Yi Li out of the main hall and picked up a few stalks of hidden Luoming flowers before bringing Yi Li out of the southern border Holy Land. The two of them left the valley and walked back the way they came. The two horses that they thought had already run away were actually still leisurely nibbling on the grass on the ground. The two of them randomly chose a flat and comfortable place to sit down. They took out the dry rations and wine that they had brought with them to eat. Mo Xiuyao took out the 2 flowers that he had brought out from the valley. His brows furrowed. Yi Li glanced at him indifferently, half leaning on him as she said, we were too prejudiced before. If one of these 2 flowers is the hidden Luoming flower, then it must be that one. Although the red spider lily has antidote properties, it also has a poison that can kill a person. Adding on the name of the Yellow Springs flower, we thought that it was the hidden Luoming flower. But in terms of medicinal properties, this is more like the Yellow Springs flower that can drag a person into the netherworld. Mo Xiuyao nodded and put down the plant in his hand, nodding as he said, does Li know what Lei Tongfeng came here for? Yi Li frowned and thought for a moment. She raised her head and said, he also wants the medicine made from that flower? Mo Xiuyao nodded and said, that's right. I don't know where he got the information from, but he really does want to buy this medicine from the southern border people. And he wants to buy it in bulk. However, the people of the southern wilderness don't seem to understand this medicine very well. It's very difficult to manufacture it. That elder only agreed to sell him a small portion. Yi Li's expression turned even uglier. If he wanted to use it to control or harm someone like Mo Jingli, he wouldn't have needed to buy so many of those things. How much does Lei Tongfeng want? Mo Xiuyao seemed to have thought of this as well. He said in a low voice, he said that he wants as much as he can get. Not just now, but every year in the future. Yi Li thought for a while, then looked at Mo Xiuyao and said solemnly, we can't let that valley exist anymore. If that thing really spreads, the consequences will be unthinkable. Lei Tongfeng had bought so many of those things, it was obvious what he wanted to use them for. Mo Xiuyao nodded and said, those Yu Luoming flowers still need a few more days to mature. We didn't make any preparations today and we don't have enough time. When we get back, we'll have Qi Lin's people come over and burn this valley. Yi Li nodded and said, have people keep an eye on the southern border. It might not be the only place that has that kind of thing. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and agreed. After resting for a while, Mo Xiaoyao pulled Yi Li up and said with a smile, "We should go back. Let's find something interesting to play with on the way back." Yi Li raised her eyebrows. She didn't understand what he meant by something interesting. Mo Xiaoyao smiled darkly and said, "Robbery." On the official road to the southern Zhao kingdom, several horses galloped past. Lei Tongfeng was at the front. His handsome face had a smug smile. Just as he was thinking about something, he heard the sound of an arrow whistling through the air. Lei Tongfeng was startled. He slapped the back of his horse and soared into the air, dodging the arrow. The guards following behind him were also startled. "There's an assassin. Protect the air." The assassin didn't show himself. With two whooshing sounds, two more arrows shot out at the same time. Two guards immediately fell to the ground. The other party's archery was very good. If they couldn't see the enemy, they could only be shot to death like targets. The guards gritted their teeth. Two of them protected Lei Tongfeng while the others flew in the direction of the arrows. They rushed into the forest on the side and found that it was empty. There wasn't a single person in sight. Not far away, Yi Li leaned against a large tree. The corners of her lips lifted slightly as she looked at the guards searching for her. These people didn't think that she would stay here and wait for them, right? The guards searched the forest for a while but didn't find anything. Just as they were about to leave the forest, a white figure suddenly flashed in front of them. One of the guards shouted in shock, "You!" Everyone felt a chill on their necks and fell to the ground in a daze. Lei Tongfeng waited on the road outside the forest for a while but still didn't see any movement in the forest. He knew that the guards who went in were most likely dead. For this trip, in order to not attract attention, he only brought a few guards with him. He didn't think that he would encounter such a troublesome assassin. Although his heart was anxious, Lei Tongfeng didn't show any panic on his face. He cupped his hands and said, "I don't know which senior is inside. If this one has offended you, I will definitely prepare a gift to apologize. I hope that senior will be lenient." What answered him was 2 arrows. The last 2 guards by his side fell to the ground. Lei Tongfeng's heart sank. He didn't care about anything else as he turned around and ran away. However, he didn't know that Mo Xiaoyao was waiting for this moment. Just as he turned around and ran a few steps, a majestic force came from behind him. Lei Tongfeng felt a pain in his chest and immediately lost consciousness. Mo Xiaoyao stood with his hands behind his back. He coldly looked at Lei Tongfeng who had fainted on the ground. Yi Li walked out from the forest. She put away the bow in her hands and looked at Lei Tongfeng with a smile. "Speaking of which, this is the second time that Genom of Gojosian has fallen into our hands, right?" Mo Xiaoyao lightly snorted, not caring at all. Seeing that Yi Li was about to search Lei Tongfeng's body, he pulled her back and bent down to search Lei Tongfeng's body. A moment later, Mo Xiaoyao had 2 white porcelain bottles in his hands. They looked similar to the ones that Mo Jingli had. Yi Li took the porcelain bottle that Mo Xiaoyao handed over and opened it. She poured out a few pills and placed them under her nose to smell them. Although the appearance of the pills was a bit strange, the ingredients of the pills couldn't fool Yi Li. It was indeed made from the hidden Luo underworld flowers that filled the valleys of the southern border Holy Land. There were at least 20 pills in this small bottle. What surprised Yi Li was that the purity of these pills was quite impressive. She was afraid that the first time she used it, she wouldn't be able to bear it. She turned to ask Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao lightly said, "That elder said that at the beginning, we can only use water to dissolve a quarter of it." Yi Li said in a low voice, "So it was like that. What about him?" Mo Xiaoyao used his chin to point at the unconscious Lei Tongfeng and asked. Yi Li thought for a while and smiled, "We've already used Lei Tongfeng in exchange for benefits. If we use this trick again, Genom of Gojosian will become angry. Let him lie here. There are people coming and going on this road, it's not convenient for us to bring another person with us." This suggestion was exactly what Mo Xiaoyao wanted. He also didn't want to bring a hindrance with him and Li. The two of them didn't hesitate to take all of Lei Tongfeng's valuables. They left behind only a set of clothes and rode off on their horses. The two of them took a detour along the way and delayed their journey for a few days. It was only 2 days before Princess Anshi's wedding that they returned to Nanjiao Kingdom. By this time, the envoys from various countries had arrived. Chapter 519. When the two entered the courtyard of the post house, they encountered Lei Tongfeng. Perhaps because of what had happened a few days ago, Lei Tongfeng's expression was not very good. Seeing Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao come in hand, he first stilled before going forward to greet them. "Prince Ding, Princess Ding, you are." Yi Li did not avoid the greeting and said with a generous smile, "So it is Shizzy. We came a few days earlier than Shizzy and went out with the prince to walk around and experience the customs of Nanjiao. This trip was not in vain. But Shizzy. I see that Shizzy's expression is not very good. Did you just get to Nanjiao and had a bumpy journey?" Yi Li's words were very sincere. Even Lei Tongfeng could not tell if Yi Li's words were sincere or if she was rejoicing in his misfortune. After all, although the matter of him encountering bandits on the road was known by everyone in Nanjiao Imperial City, Princess Ding had also said that she and Prince Ding had just returned from outside. Looking at Mo Xiaoyao standing behind Yi Li, Lei Tongfeng's mind suddenly moved. He smiled faintly and said, "Many thanks for Wang Fei's concern. Where did Prince Ding and Wang Fei go to play? After Princess Anshi's wedding, this one will have some free time to go out." Yi Li said with a smile, "The prince said that Nanjiao has a snake valley. Inside, there are thousands of poisonous snakes and fiery red and beautiful flowers. I was curious and followed the prince to see what was going on. I have embarrassed myself in front of Shizzy." Lei Tongfeng frowned slightly. The Snake Valley and the road where he had been attacked were in the east and the west. They were not on the same road. In reality, Lei Tongfeng did not suspect Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao too much. After all, the news of him going to the southern border Holy Land was very secretive. It could even be said that it was an impromptu decision. It was impossible for Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to have known beforehand that they were waiting for him on the road. It was just that the force that had struck him at the end was too strong. There weren't many people in the world who could do that. Now that he saw Mo Xiaoyao, he couldn't help but want to test him. Lei Tongfeng smiled and said, "If that's the case, then it's indeed a rare and beautiful place. Later on, I must go and enjoy it. Prince and Princess Consort have just returned and must be tired. This one will not disturb you any longer. Please excuse me." Yi Li nodded and smiled. "Take care, Shizzy." When they returned to the courtyard that Princess Anshi had arranged for them, Shu Qingchen was already waiting for them. Young Master Qingchen was dressed in white. He was sitting at the stone table under the tree, leisurely brewing tea. He glanced at the two of them casually, which made Yi Li feel guilty for no reason. Yi Li felt guilty, but Mo Xiaoyao did not know what guilt was. He pulled Yi Li to the table and sat down without hesitation. Shu Qingchen poured a cup of tea for each of them and said with a faint smile, "Prince and Princess Consort, did you enjoy your trip?" "It was all right. The time was too short," Mo Xiaoyao said coolly. The corner of Shu Qingchen's mouth twitched imperceptibly. He glanced coolly at Yi Li. Yi Li pulled Mo Xiaoyao guiltily. They had suddenly left. All the social matters in the palace had been left to eldest brother. It was normal for eldest brother to be angry. Mo Xiaoyao snorted softly. He looked at Shu Qingchen and casually told him what he had seen in the southern border Holy Land. After Shu Qingchen heard this, an expression that did not belong to young Master Qingchen finally appeared on his handsome face. Shu Qingchen's expression was unusually dark. He gritted his teeth and said, "Prince is telling me that after you found such an important matter, you did not come back to deal with it, but took Princess Consort in a circle and then continued on your trip." Mo Xiaoyao looked innocently at him. "What is wrong?" He looked at Yi Li with a wronged expression. "See, your brother is unreasonable." Yi Li rolled her eyes at the sky. Shu Qingchen's anger had not subsided. "Do you have a brain? No one knows how many experts there are in the southern border Holy Land, and how dangerous it is. You dare to take Li Er and charge in? If you want to die, don't drag Li Er with you. Mo Xiaoyao said, there's no one inside. Li and I went in and pretended to be there. No one discovered us when we came out. Xu Qingchen smiled coldly. That's because your luck is good. The day you left, Xu Manlin secretly sent hundreds of first-class experts into Imperial City. Mo Xiaoyao nodded in agreement. I's luck has always been very good. Seeing Xu Qingchen's expression change again, Yi Li hurriedly poured a cup of tea for him. Eldest brother, calm down. Prince. She glanced warningly at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao twisted his mouth in dissatisfaction. Li was the most biased. Looking at the two men who didn't like each other, Yi Li sighed helplessly. She didn't count on Mo Xiaoyao anymore. She told them everything that had happened. Hearing Yi Li mention the hidden luo flower, Xu Qingchen couldn't be bothered to be angry with Mo Xiaoyao anymore. His handsome brows furrowed as he said in a low voice, Mo Jingli wants to give that to the emperor? Yi Li nodded and said, I think so. In these years, Mo Jingqi and his brother seem to be in harmony, but in reality, they've been fighting both openly and secretly. Mo Jingli sits on the richest half of Da Chu State's southern territory. How could he be willing to be under one person? He probably can't wait. Xu Qingchen laughed coldly, idiot. The southern border people clearly don't have good intentions. Does Mo Jingli think that by using this method to kill Mo Jingqi, Xu Manlin won't have something that can be used against him? The Da Chu state was different from the southern border. It paid the most attention to propriety, righteousness, honor, loyalty, filial piety, and righteousness. Once the news of Mo Jingli murdering his elder brother the emperor spread, he might as well start a rebellion if he wanted to sit on the throne. When the Nanjiao people have something that can be used against him, Mo Jingli would just be a puppet. Xu Manlin has a good plan. Does Big Brother have news of Tan Jiji? Yi Li said with a faint smile. Xu Qingchen nodded and said, I have some understanding of Xu Manlin. She doesn't have the brains. It must be Tan Jiji who gave her the idea behind the scenes. Getting rid of Princess Anshi and obtaining Nanjiao, then controlling Mo Jingli from behind the scenes to control the Da Chu state, it really is a good idea. It's just that his thinking is a bit too smooth. Yi Li looked at Mo Xiaoyao and asked, Xiaoyao, what do you think? Mo Xiaoyao leaned against the tree behind him and said with a lazy smile, what can I think? What does the brothers fighting for the throne have to do with us outsiders? In this way, he didn't care. Xu Qingchen sighed softly. Mo Xiaoyao and the Da Chu state's imperial family had a deep hatred. Many people were secretly surprised that Mo Xiaoyao didn't send out troops from the start. He naturally couldn't save Mo Jingqi. Mo Jingqi had been guarding the Prince Ding mansion against Mo Xiuwen and Mo Xiaoyao ever since the registration. He probably didn't expect that the person who wanted his life the most was his biological younger brother. Thinking about it, Xu Qingchen nodded and said, fine, it's right for us to ignore this matter. The Northwest had already broken off relations with the Da Chu state. Then it was best for them to not participate in the Da Chu state's affairs. Although they were at peace now, everyone knew that there would be a day when the Da Chu state and the Northwest would fight. If the Northwest interfered in the Da Chu state's internal affairs during this time, it would be bad for the reputation of Prince Ding and the Mohist army. Xu Manlin probably has big plans this time. Thinking of the hundreds of experts that Xu Manlin had transferred from the sacred land of Nanjiang, Xu Qingchen frowned and said, those who could live in the sacred land of Nanjiang were definitely top experts. More importantly, the people of Nanjiao were good at using poisonous GU. This made them even more dangerous. Because of this, the people of the Central Plains didn't like to interact with the people of Nanjiang. They didn't bring many guards this time. If something really happened, it would be very troublesome. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, I'm afraid Princess Anshi isn't easy to deal with. With young Master Qingchen's secret guidance, she'll be even more powerful. Princess Anshi was able to fight against Xu Manlin for so many years under the protection of the King of Nanjiao and still remain undefeated. Naturally, she wasn't someone who could be easily bullied. Shu Qingchen smiled faintly and nodded. Princess Anchi told me that Pur and her grandfather's tribe sent many experts. And over the years, she has many loyal death warriors under her. But this wedding. A good wedding would inevitably be stained with blood. Mo Xiaoyao said, the people of Nanjiao don't believe in this. I'm sure they won't mind. Shu Qingchen was helpless. Was this a matter of whether they minded or not? No one would be happy to see a bloodbath at their wedding. Yi Li put her elbow on the table and said thoughtfully, could it be that Princess Anchi held this wedding to deal with Shu Manlin? Shu Qingchen was startled. What do you mean? Yi Li shook her head and said, I don't know. I just think that Princess Anchi's wedding came too suddenly. And, she even secretly invited experts to help. If Princess Anchi was not a clairvoyant, then she must have deliberately set a trap for Shu Manlin to turn inside. But this doesn't make sense. After all, the king of Nanjiao is still here. Even if Princess Anchi wins, she can't kill Shu Manlin. Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, I'm afraid that Princess Anchi was forced by Shu Manlin and the king of Nanjiao and had to take the risk. Have you noticed that the king of Nanjiao's attitude towards Pur can be said to be completely ignored? That is to say, the king of Nanjiao doesn't really agree with this wedding. In his heart. I'm afraid that the king of Nanjiao wants to depose Princess Anchi. The king of Nanjiao has no other children. To depose Princess Anchi, Mo Xiaoyao smiled and said, of course it's Shu Manlin. The Saintess of Nanjiang has a unique status in Nanjiao. In history, there have been cases where the Saintess of Nanjiang temporarily took over the throne, although it was only for a very short period of time. And in recent years, Shu Manlin has been respected as the savior of Nanjiao. The restrictions she has been subjected to are far less than the previous saintesses. It can be said that there are almost no restrictions. In recent years, her influence in the court has gradually been able to compete with Princess Anchi's. In this case, it's not impossible to persuade the king of Nanjiao to appoint another crown princess. Yi Li sighed helplessly. Just listening to the struggles for power in the royal family made her feel tired. It was hard for a girl like Princess Anchi to be able to persevere in such a situation. What does the prince mean? Mo Xiaoyao smiled faintly and said, the crown princess can't be deposed, and the Saintess of Nanjiang can't die. Shu Qingchen was silent. Mo Xiaoyao wanted to keep them to continue fighting, in case the Nanjiao started other things when they were free. After all, the Nanjiao people were eyeing the Central Plains covetously. Even if the Daqu state had nothing to do with the Mohist army now, they couldn't let the Nanjiao covet it. Chapter 520. Reporting to Princess Prince, Princess Changle, noble consort Liu of the Daqu state, requests an audience. An imperial bodyguard came in to report. Whenever Yi Li thought of noble consort Liu, she felt uncomfortable. It wasn't that she didn't believe in Mo Xiaoyao's feelings for her. Rather, it was that a fly was always flying in front of you, yet you couldn't slap her to death. It always made one feel uncomfortable. For the first time, Yi Li discovered that Su Zuidi and Yi Ying, whom she originally hated the most, were nothing in front of this woman. Su Zuidi was only narcissistic and vain. Yi Ying was only opinionated and had a bit of selfishness that everyone had. Compared to noble consort Liu's pestering, these were nothing. Mo Xiaoyao had treated her so rudely, yet she still came to visit. Yi Li didn't know where she got her mental fortitude from. Although it was said that only stupid women dealt with other women, smart women dealt with men. Against someone like noble consort Liu, no matter how well-behaved a man was, it was useless. Seeing Yi Li's unsightly expression, Mo Xiaoyao became happy. Yi Li glanced at him and said indifferently, Prince is so happy. In that case, Prince should go see noble consort Liu himself. Shu Qingchen nodded and said, Li is right. I saw that noble consort Liu received news of your return and made a special trip over. She most likely didn't come to see Li. Don't waste your energy. Li must be tired these past few days. Go back to your room and rest. Hearing this, Mo Xiaoyao glared at Shu Qingchen with resentment. His hands rested on Yi Li's body, unwilling to let go. Don't. Li don't go. Shu Qingchen speechlessly looked at the increasingly childish man and helpless little sister in front of her. She stood up and left. Even though she knew that Mo Xiaoyao was acting, Li couldn't bear to part with him. What could he do? He didn't feel like sitting there and being an eyesore. As the saying goes, even an honest and upright official would find it difficult to resolve a family dispute. Those two people, one was willing to hit while the other was willing to be hit. It really had nothing to do with him. Young Master Qingchen sighed helplessly as he turned around to look at the two people who were sitting together. Young Master Qingchen, who had not been troubled by love for half of his life, could not understand this kind of mutual affection. What is love? How would this young master know? Mo Xiaoyao accompanied Yi Li for a long time to coax his wife. He silently remembered that in the future, even if he felt proud because Ali cared about him, he must not show it in front of Ali, otherwise, Ali would be shy. The guards in the yard were used to seeing their prince fawning over the princess consort without caring about his image. Young Master Feng-san was right. It was normal to be henpecked. By the time noble consort Liu and Princess Changle were invited inside, their complexions were quite unsightly. Prince Ding's ability to coax people was not good enough. As a result, noble consort Liu had to wait for nearly an hour before she was allowed to enter. When Princess Changle saw Yi Li's smile, she winked at her. Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded her head. Extending her hand, she beckoned Princess Changle over to sit. Princess Changle bluntly walked over to Yi Li's side and sat down. Laughing softly, she asked, "Princess Ding, did you and royal uncle go out to play? Yesterday, I wanted to find you to play, but young Master Feng-san said that you were not here." Yi Li nodded her head and replied with a smile, "I have indeed not been here these past few days." "Did Princess just arrive yesterday?" Princess Changle nodded her head and said, "You all walked so quickly. Our carriage couldn't keep up with you." Noble consort Liu walked over. Looking at Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao, she asked, "Has the prince been well these past few days?" Mo Xiaoyao leaned against Yi Li, paying no attention to her words. Noble consort Liu could not help but change her expression. Clenching her teeth, she continued, "Princess consort, I have something to discuss with the prince. Would it be possible for me to leave for a moment?" Yi Li raised her eyes and glanced at noble consort Liu before lowering her head to look at Mo Xiaoyao, who was leaning against her. Mo Xiaoyao raised his head and gazed pitifully at her. His pair of dark eyes appeared particularly bright under his snow-white hair. "Wife, your husband has not spoken with her. Don't leave me behind, Fut." Seated to the side, Princess Changle could not help but burst out in laughter. She nearly choked on the tea she had just swallowed and could only cough incessantly. "Princess consort. Uncle Prince Ding." Princess Changle truly did not know what to say. In her mind, Uncle Prince Ding had always been wise, mighty, and unapproachable. However, was this person who was gazing pitifully at Princess Ding really the awe-inspiring Uncle Prince Ding? Yi Li helplessly rolled her eyes at Mo Xiaoyao. To Princess Changle, she said, "He's gone crazy. Don't pay attention to him." Mo Xiaoyao was displeased. His handsome face rubbed against Yi Li's body. "Wife, this woman harbors ill intentions towards your husband. You have to protect me. Good boy." Yi Li reached out and patted him, speaking perfunctorily. Raising her head to look at noble consort Liu, Yi Li sternly stated, "Noble consort, you've frightened our prince." Noble consort Liu's beautiful face instantly distorted. Forcing a smile, she replied, "Miss, Yi must be joking. The prince is unparalleled in wisdom and courage. How could he be frightened by me?" Yi Li indifferently replied, "That's not necessarily true. Clingy women are the most frightening. Our prince has always been most afraid of those shameless women. Take a look and see if he's frightened." Mo Xiaoyao repeatedly nodded his head. Although his face could not be seen, his unhesitatingly nodding his head caused noble consort Liu to lose all face. "Yi Li, you." Noble consort Liu finally could not bear it any longer. She did her best to maintain her good manners as she sternly shouted. However, before she could say anything, A cold and gloomy gaze interrupted her words. Mo Xiaoyao leaned his head against Yi Li's shoulder and turned his face. His silver hair covered most of his face, but his eyes, carrying a sinister and ruthless aura that seemed to have come from the depths of hell, stared straight at noble consort Liu. Noble consort Liu had always hoped that this man would look her in the eye. At that time, when Mo Xiaoyao's gaze truly landed on her body, she felt as if her entire body had been frozen. Even though the fear in her heart had nearly taken over her entire being, she was so stiff that she did not even dare to move. That pair of deep, handsome eyes carried an unprecedented killing intent. Noble consort Liu even suspected that her eyes were playing tricks on her, that she had seen a flash of blood in Mo Xiaoyao's eyes. Since the prince has matters to attend to, I will take my leave first. Finished speaking, noble consort Liu walked out of the courtyard without the slightest hesitation, as if an evil spirit were chasing after her. She even forgot to call Princess Changle to return with her. Yi Li and Princess Changle looked at each other in dismay. They did not understand why noble consort Liu, who had previously refused to leave, would suddenly run away as if she had seen a ghost. "Prince, what did you do?" Yi Li asked, raising her eyebrows. Mo Xiaoyao innocently blinked his eyes. "How could I do anything to her? Princess Li, have a good chat with Changle. I'll go find Feng Jiao and have a drink together." Yi Li knew that he was looking for Feng Jiao. Nodding her head, she watched as he rose and left. Only after Mo Xiaoyao had left did Princess Changle put down the teacup she had been holding. Leaning over the table, she began to giggle. Looking at her helplessly, Yi Li asked, "Is it really that funny?" Princess Changle's eyes curved into crescents as she laughed. Raising her head to look at Yi Li, she stated, "Of course it's funny. If it weren't for the fact that the princess consort is also here, I truly wouldn't dare to believe that this is Uncle Ding." Chapter 521. Yi Li reached out and patted her. Smiling faintly, she replied, "What do you think Prince Ding is like? Always domineering and unhindered. Everyone has to live their lives. In private, they are naturally more casual. As for you, I have never had the opportunity to properly chat with you. No princes have come to attend Princess Anche's wedding. What is a princess like you doing here?" The smile on Princess Changle's face gradually faded. Smiling faintly, she replied, "Naturally, it is Imperial Father who has ordered me to represent the Imperial household in attending the wedding of the Princess of Nanjiao." Yi Li lightly snorted. In a cold voice, she asked, "Are all the princes of the Dachu state dead? He wants a princess like you to come alone. There is also that noble consort Liu. Since she is an imperial concubine of the imperial harem, according to the rules of the Dachu state, she should not be here even more than you." Princess Changle replied, "I heard that noble consort Liu personally begged Imperial Father to come. These past few years, Imperial Father has increasingly trusted the Liu family and doted on noble consort Liu. Presumably, agreeing to her request is not strange. However, only now do I know that noble consort Liu begged Imperial Father to come because she wanted to meet with Uncle Prince Ding." Yi Li reached out and took Princess Changle's slender, jade-like hand. With a stern expression, she asked, "Changle, don't change the topic. Tell me, why did your Imperial Father have you come to the southern border? Does he want you to marry into the Dachu state?" Princess Changle stared blankly for a moment. Gritting her teeth, she smiled and said, "As expected, it is impossible to hide from Princess Ding and Uncle Prince Ding. Imperial Father does not want me to marry into the Dachu state. He wants to gift me to the King of Nanjiao." Hearing this, Yi Li's face sank. "Has Mo Jingqi gone mad? You are the eldest princess of the first wife of the Dachu state. It is one thing to marry into the Dachu state, but what does he mean by gifting you to the King of Nanjiao?" Princess Changle grasped Yi Li's hand. Smiling faintly, she replied, "I know that Princess is concerned about me. However, whether it is a gift or a marriage, there is not much difference. Isn't this the purpose of the daughters of the imperial household?" Seeing the faint smile and sadness on the young girl's face, Yi Li felt a slight pain in her heart. She asked in a low voice, "What did your mother say?" Frowning, Princess Changle replied, "Imperial Mother naturally did not agree. Imperial Mother said that even if a political marriage was to be carried out, it must be carried out according to the rules. However, Imperial Father insisted on not agreeing. Before I left, Imperial Mother quarreled with Imperial Father and was locked up in the palace by Imperial Father. Before I left, Imperial Father didn't allow me to see Imperial Mother. I don't know." At this point, the girl who was trying her best to hide her emotions with a smile finally couldn't hold back her tears. Thinking back to the last time she had seen her Imperial Mother, the apologetic expression on her mother's face, Princess Changle could not stop her eyes from brimming with tears. Yi Li understood. Mo Jingqi's actions were not just for the marriage alliance with Nanzhao, but to use this to humiliate the Empress and the Hua family. However, no matter how dissatisfied Mo Jingqi was with the Empress and the Hua family, could it be that he had forgotten that Changle was his own flesh and blood? Looking at the dainty young girl before her, Yi Li sighed softly. She asked, "Do you truly intend to follow your Imperial Father's arrangements? Although I don't have a daughter, I still have children. If a child were to encounter such a situation, how heartbroken would a mother be? Let's not talk about your Imperial Father, but your Imperial Mother. If you were truly to be gifted to the King of Nanzhao, I fear that your Imperial Mother would feel guilty for the rest of her life." Princess Changle raised her hand to wipe away her tears. Choking with sobs, she replied, "In the past, I told Princess that if the Dhu state needed a political marriage in the future, as a princess, I would naturally not shirk my duty. Only now do I know, the so-called responsibility of a princess was nothing more than my own self-righteousness. Imperial Father simply did not need me, his daughter, to help him forge a political marriage and strengthen the friendship between the two countries. All he wanted was to see his maternal grandfather, the Empress Dowager, and his Imperial Mother unhappy. He wanted to embarrass the Hua family. That day, when Imperial Mother went to speak to Imperial Father about my marriage, I heard it from outside the door. Imperial Father said that he would not allow me to marry openly, nor would he allow me to remain in the Chu capital. Given my status, if I were to marry into another country, at the very least, I would be the official consort of a prince. He said that in the future, if I were to side with outsiders, I would definitely help others deal with him. If I were to marry into the Chu capital, I would definitely rope in my husband's family to help the Hua family make things difficult for him. As a result, he wanted to send me to Nanzhao, making it so that I would never be the Empress of Nanzhao and could only be a lowly consort." Hearing Princess Changle's words, Yi Li could not help but want to give Mo Jingqi a vicious beating. Sighing, she asked, "Princess, should I have someone escort you out of here?" Shaking her head, Princess Changle replied, "Many thanks to Princess, but there is no need for this. Since Changle has promised Imperial Father to come to Nanzhao, I will not escape midway." I only ask that Princess, if there is an opportunity in the future, take care of my Imperial Mother and the Hua family. Yi Li wanted to continue persuading Princess Changle, but an Imperial bodyguard came to report that a palace maid from the Dhu state had come looking for Princess Changle. Presumably, noble consort Liu had left in a panic and returned to her courtyard only to discover that Princess Changle was still here. Thus, she had sent someone to search for her. Standing up, Princess Changle smiled and said, "Princess, I will be leaving first." "Right, you must be careful of noble consort Liu. That woman is extremely crazy." Yi Li nodded. In a low voice, she instructed, "Be careful. If there is anything you need help with, send someone to inform me." "Many thanks, Princess. Farewell." In a day or two, it would be Princess Anchi's wedding. The commoners of Nanzhao treated this crown princess with great respect. The entire Nanzhao royal city was bustling with noise and excitement. Many commoners of Nanzhao had specially made their way to the royal city to participate in this grand occasion. In a tea house that was obviously owned by people from the Dhu state, Yi Li sat by the window, leisurely sipping tea. Mo Xiaoyao leaned back in his chair, coldly looking at the two irksome men across from him. "Why have you two appeared here?" Han Mingxi gracefully took a sip of the fine wine in his cup. With a languid expression, he smiled wholeheartedly. Prince, what are you saying? Princess Anche's wedding is no small matter. This one is a merchant. Merchants pursue profit. Why can't this one be here? Mo Xiaoyao narrowed his eyes dangerously. Coldly, he stated, since that is the case, you should go about your business. Why have you come looking for us? Han Mingxi set down his cup. Sincerely, he replied, Prince, you have misunderstood. This subordinate has not come looking for you. The one this subordinate seeks an audience with is the princess. You came of your own accord. Ha ha. Sitting next to Han Mingxi was really young Master Mingyu, Han Mingyu. Even though he no longer had the demeanor of young Master Mingyu, it was clear that Han Mingxi had taken good care of his older brother these past few years. Han Mingyu's brows seemed to have experienced the vicissitudes of life, but he was still in good spirits. Seeing Mo Xiaoyao's expression change, Han Mingyu couldn't help but smile. Worried that Mo Xiaoyao would take his anger out on his younger brother, he said, It's been so many years. It's rare to see Prince's expression change. Even though Han Mingyu had been living in Li City these past few years and Su Zuidi was no longer alive, the friendship between them could not be broken. But the brotherhood from before couldn't go back, so Han Mingyu didn't pretend that nothing had happened and directly called Mo Xiaoyao's name. Prince. This form of address indicated their current relationship and distance. Han Mingxi snorted softly and raised his eyebrows. Didn't Prince often change his expression? Was that why his older brother was unable to see through people? All right, Mingxi, why did you make a trip to Nanjiao? Seeing that Mo Xiaoyao was really about to explode, Yi Li hurriedly interrupted. Han Mingxi's expression changed and he nodded, that's right. After I sent Yaoji back to the Chu capital, I met with Leng Haoyu. It was he who wanted me to pass a message to the prince and the princess. Seeing Han Mingxi like this, Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li knew that it must be an extremely important matter. Otherwise, Leng Haoyu would not have asked Han Mingxi to pass the message instead of directly sending someone to deliver it to Li City. Yi Li frowned slightly and said, What happened to the Chu capital? Han Mingxi shook his head and said, Nothing happened to the Chu capital, but I'm afraid that something will happen to Mo Jingqi. Mo Xiaoyao snorted disdainfully. Was it strange that something would happen to Mo Jingqi? Even his own younger brother wanted to kill him. It could be seen how much he wanted to anger the heavens and people. It would be strange if nothing happened. Han Mingxi looked at the two's expressions and understood. He said with a smile, It seems that it's not just one group that wants to deal with Mo Jingqi. Could it be that the prince also knows something? Let me think, is it Mo Jingli? Yi Li did not answer and asked with a smile, The one you want to talk about is not Mo Jingli? Han Mingxi said with a smile, Of course not, it's the Liu family. The Liu family? Yi Li was surprised. Although they had guessed that the Liu family was very ambitious, why did they want to deal with Mo Jingqi? At present, the Liu family that Mo Jingqi trusted the most and favored noble consort Liu the most. What benefit could they get from dealing with Mo Jingqi? Mo Xiaoyao frowned slightly and quickly reacted. He asked, The Liu family wants to help noble consort Liu's imperial son ascend the throne? A trace of admiration flashed through Han Mingxi's eyes. He nodded and said, Correct. Speaking of which, Mo Jingqi's luck is not bad. Originally, the Liu family had planned to act soon. After taking over Mo Jingqi, they suddenly sent Prime Minister Liu to Nanjiao. This caused the Liu family to panic for a while, and only then did our people see the clues. Otherwise, the news we received might have been that the Da Chu state had a new emperor and that Mo Jingqi had died. Yi Li couldn't help but rub her forehead. How did Mo Jingqi make himself so isolated? Mo Xiaoyao was unmoved. How is this important news? Does Leng Haoyu have nothing better to do? What did it have to do with him whether Mo Jingqi died or not? The more miserable Mo Jingqi died, the happier he would be. Although it was a bit regretful that he didn't do it himself, he didn't mind if someone else was willing to do it for him. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. If that's the case, Naturally no one would care about this matter. However, Leng Haoyu said that this matter wasn't just the work of the Liu family. It seems that the northern tribes and some tribes in the north are also involved. I'm afraid that the day Mo Jingqi dies is the day these people enter the Da state. The northern tribes and the tribes in the north are all involved. Han Mingxi nodded. Otherwise, with the Liu family's ability, how could they have the courage to usurp the throne without the support of others? Yi Li frowned. In a low voice, she said, Princess Chang'e is likely to be in danger. Mo Xiaoyao nodded and said, someone wants to drive a wedge between Mo Jingqi and the Hua family. Naturally, it is best to start with Princess Chang'e. Chapter 522. Nanzhao's wedding was very different from that of the Central Plains. Princess Anxi and Pua's wedding was held in the square in front of the palace. Not only the nobles and envoys of Nanjiang, but also the common people of Nanzhao gathered in the square to celebrate the princess's wedding. Although the northwest was not big and was not even a real country, Nanzhao still arranged for Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li to sit closest to the king of Nanzhao and the newlyweds. Even the envoys of Da State and West Hill had to sit behind them. Although Prime Minister Liu was unhappy because of this, he was not a reckless man. Naturally, he would not confront Mo Xiaoyao because of this. Lei Tongfeng's face was still gloomy and his eyebrows were tightly knitted. Obviously, he was very worried about being robbed and losing the medicine he had just obtained. However, this time, Genom King of Gojosian did not come with him because he wanted his son to be independent. Therefore, Lei Tongfeng could not find anyone to discuss with. Princess Anxi was wearing a snow-white dress embroidered with delicate blue patterns. She was sitting next to the groom. She usually looked valiant, but now she looked more beautiful. Xu Manlin was wearing a saintess's yellow robe and exquisite makeup. She was sitting next to the king of Nanzhao with a smile, but she seemed to be more dazzling than the bride. If it were not for noble consort Liu, who was even more beautiful and cold, most people's eyes would have fallen on her. Feng Jiao was sitting behind Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao. He looked at the women present and teased, "Oh, princess, you seem to have been defeated." Yi Li pursed her lips and smiled faintly. She did not answer. She didn't want to steal the bride's attention. Mo Xiaoyao looked down at his wife beside him. She was wearing a light blue robe and her hair was in a simple and neat bun with 2 blue jade hairpins. She looked elegant and graceful. Under the moonlight and the lights, her eyes looked even more beautiful and charming. In Ai's eyes, Miss Li is the most beautiful. Yi Li looked at him with a smile and said, Master Prince Ding, no matter how well you say it, I won't forget that you still have a confidant who is eagerly waiting for you. Mo Xiaoyao, of course, also sensed a certain someone's gaze. He snorted disdainfully and said, if Li doesn't like it, I'll just get someone to dig out that pair of eyes. What do I need eyeballs for? Do you want to eat? Yi Li rolled her eyes. Mo Xiaoyao seriously considered for a moment, then said, it doesn't taste good, feed it to Mo Xiaobao. Yi Li was completely speechless. It didn't taste good, so she fed it to Mo Xiaobao. Was that what he meant? Was Mo Xiaobao really someone he had picked up from the outside? She glared fiercely at Mo Xiaoyao. If you don't want to feed Mo Xiaobao, how about feeding Dabao? Mo Xiaoyao blinked and understood who the Dabao in Yi Li's mouth was. Frowning, he said, I don't want to eat it. Behind them, Feng Jiao was sweating profusely. How cheap was his mouth to be so talkative? Also, how capable were the 2 people in front of them to be able to deviate from the topic to such an extent? Please don't discuss such a cruel topic at someone else's wedding, okay? If Princess Anxi's marriage is unlucky in the future, it will definitely be because of you too. Princess Consort. Princess Chang'e doesn't seem to have appeared. Finally, Feng Jiao could not stand the increasingly cruel conversation and spoke up to remind her. Yi Li looked towards the table of the emissaries from the Da state. Sure enough, she did not see Princess Anxi. Instead, she saw noble consort Liu, who had been staring fixedly at Mo Xiaoyao, reveal a strange smile. Yi Li frowned in thought. Turning her head, she gave Feng Jiao a few instructions in a low voice. Feng Jiao's expression changed slightly. Finally, while no one was paying attention, he stealthily withdrew from the plaza. Feng Jiao's stealthy withdrawal did not affect anyone. Mo Xiaoyao and Yi Li continued to chat and laugh in low voices. Although the two of them had no intention of competing with the newlyweds for attention, the gazes on them did not lessen at all. Mo Xiaoyao inadvertently looked towards the opposite side, just in time to see Mo Jingli staring at him in a daze, as well as Lei Tongfeng's pensive expression. A cold light flashed through his eyes. He snorted softly and smiled mockingly at Mo Jingli. Mo Jingli naturally saw the cold smile on Mo Xiaoyao's face. However, he did not feel the embarrassment of being caught peeping at someone else's wife. Instead, he proudly glared at Mo Xiaoyao. Mo Xiaoyao raised the wine cup in his hand and silently said, "I wish you all the best." Although Mo Jingli had always disliked Mo Xiaoyao, he still paid close attention to his every move. Naturally, he understood Mo Xiaoyao's meaning. At first, he did not take it to heart. However, when he saw the faint smile on Mo Xiaoyao's face, his heart couldn't help but tremble. He felt as if something had been seen through by Mo Xiaoyao. This feeling of his most secret being seen through by an enemy made Mo Jingli feel very uncomfortable. Naturally, he was not in the mood to look at Yi Li. After the king of Nanzhao personally held the wedding for Princess Anxi and Puerju, he returned to the palace early. Then the entire square became a sea of joy. Everyone, including Princess Anxi and her new husband, sang and danced happily. Amidst this joy, Yi Li and Mo Xiaoyao sat in the most inconspicuous corner and watched everything in front of them. The weddings in Nanjiang are not as formal as those in the Central Plains, but they are more lively, Yi Li said in a low voice with a laugh. Mo Xiaoyao looked with interest at the people dancing and singing below. He asked, "Miss Li, should we go down and have fun with them?" Yi Li glanced coolly at him and said, "If you like, go yourself. I don't know how to dance." Mo Xiaoyao was slightly regretful but quickly thought better of it. "Then never mind. I don't want to see Miss Li dance in front of others." Princess Consort. Zhuo Jing appeared behind the two and whispered a few words into Yi Li's ear. Yi Li frowned. Raising her head, she said to Mo Xiaoyao, "Something has happened with Chang'e. Let's go first." Although Mo Xiaoyao was not very familiar with Princess Chang'e, she was still the daughter of Empress Hua. Moreover, Mo Xiaoyao had a favorable impression of the little girl. She was completely different from her father. Nodding his head, Zhuo Jing pulled Yi Li and prepared to leave. However, he was stopped by a voice behind him. "Prince, are you going back so early?" At some point, noble consort Liu had walked over. Even though the night was lit and the crowd was surging, noble consort Liu was still dressed in white. She was like the cold snow of a high mountain, stunning others yet not daring to approach her. Mo Xiaoyao frowned. Indifferently, he asked, "What does it have to do with you?" Noble consort Liu smiled faintly and replied, "Right now, the envoys from various countries are still present. For Prince Ding to leave early, isn't that disrespectful to the host?" The three people present were the center of attention. With just a few words, Mo Jingli, Lei Tongfeng, and the others' gazes all swept over. Yi Li frowned. Glancing at Mo Xiaoyao, she said, "Noble consort Liu is right. Since this is the case, Prince, there is no need for you to accompany me back. I will go back by myself." Not only was there a problem with Princess Chang'e, but Princess Anxi also needed someone to watch over her. Chapter 523. Mo Xiaoyao hesitated for a moment, already understanding Yi Li's intentions. However, he still pretended to be worried. "Can you go back by yourself?" Yi Li smiled faintly and nodded. Suspicious, noble consort Liu sized up Yi Li and asked, "What's wrong, Miss Yi?" Yi Li indifferently replied, "There are too many people tonight. This consort is feeling a bit uncomfortable, that's all." "Thank you for your concern, noble consort Liu." "Is that so?" Noble consort Liu declined to comment. However, it was clear that she was extremely happy that Yi Li had left alone. For once, she warmed her expression towards Yi Li. Then, Miss Yi should return early to rest. Yi Li was disinclined to pay attention to this woman who had a mental problem. Nodding to Mo Xiaoyao, she left the plaza with Zhuo Jing. Upon returning to the post house, just as she entered the courtyard, Feng Jiao hurriedly came out to welcome her. His expression was somewhat unsightly. Princess consort. What happened to Princess Changle? Yi Li asked. With a gloomy expression, Feng Jiao replied, Princess Changle has been sent to the palace. Yi Li frowned. When did this happen? Feng Jiao replied, when we went to participate in the wedding banquet, I was a step too late. Princess Changle had already been sent to the palace. With the spies that the Prince Ding mansion had placed in the Nanjiao Palace, it was not impossible for them to bring Princess Changle out. However, the price of doing so would inevitably be exposing the spies of the Prince Ding mansion. Furthermore, bringing Princess Changle out would result in a series of troubles. This was not something that Feng Jiao could decide. Yi Li pondered for a moment before replying, the Prince of Nanjiao has just returned to the palace. According to Nanjiao's customs, if we enter the palace now, we might still be able to make it. A light flashed in Feng Jiao's eyes. Many thanks, Princess Consort. There were not many people who came to Nanjiao this time, but Yi Li only needed Feng Jiao, Qin Feng, Zhuo Jing, Lin Han, and the two Qi Lin to enter the Nanjiao Palace. The group bypassed the noisy square in front of the palace and snuck into the palace without alerting the palace guards. Previously, Feng Jiao had already investigated clearly. Princess Changle had been directly sent to the bedchamber of the Prince of Nanjiao. Therefore, as soon as they entered the palace, they went straight to the Nanjiao king's bedroom. However, just as they arrived outside the bedroom, they heard a commotion coming from inside. There's an assassin. Feng Jiao was shocked. Have we been discovered? Qin Feng shook his head and reached out to press down on Feng Jiao, who was about to draw his sword. The defenses of the Nanjiao Palace are not that strong. With the exception of Feng Jiao, they were all top-notch concealment experts. As long as they were careful at all times, it was impossible for the Nanjiao Palace's imperial bodyguards to discover them. Sure enough, the imperial bodyguards who had heard the news did not even glance in their direction. One after another, they rushed into the bedroom. Immediately, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard from the bedroom. Yi Li raised her hand and gestured to the group behind her. The two Qi Lin, Zhuo Jing, and Lin Han split into two groups and ran towards the palace from the left and right. Very quickly, 4 shadows appeared on the roof of the bedroom. One of them gestured towards them. Before Feng Jiao could react, he was grabbed by Qin Feng, who was beside him, and flew towards the roof of the opposite palace. By the time Feng Jiao steadied himself with great difficulty, the 4 shadows had already disappeared without a trace. Helpless, Feng Jiao said, Brother Qin, my Qinggong is not bad. In addition, what did those gestures mean? Although Feng Jiao had some contact with the Qilin, he still didn't quite understand the way these people acted. Qin Feng indifferently replied, sign language. The princess consort wanted them to split into 2 groups to check the situation in front. They said that this side was safe. Feng Jiao snorted disdainfully. Why go through so much trouble? Experts all directly charge in. If they rushed in like this to rescue someone, it would be too late. Qin Feng indifferently glanced at him. That's why experts die quickly. The princess consort said that although sacrifice is often unavoidable, the lives of ordinary soldiers are still lives. Even if it is unavoidable, it should be minimized. Feng Jiao was startled, speechlessly rubbing his nose. Very quickly, another shadow appeared from under the eaves, making an extremely short gesture. Qin Feng stood up and said, let's go quickly. There aren't assassins inside. They should be people who came to rescue Princess Changle. By the time the 2 of them arrived at the innermost bedroom of the Nanjiao Palace, a fight was taking place in front of it. As far as the eye could see, Feng Jiao could not see where the 4 people were hiding. At some unknown time, Yi Li had appeared beside the 2. She asked, are those people from the Hua family down there? Feng Zhiyao's expression changed. Staring fixedly at the people fighting below, he replied, "It should be. Other than the Hua family, I cannot think of anyone else who would come to rescue Princess Chang'e. However, why did they wait until now to rescue her? No matter what, it was much more convenient to rescue someone on the road than in the Nanjiao Palace. Naturally, there is a reason why they can only rescue someone in the Nanjiao Palace," Yi Li replied. "Let's go in and take a look at Princess Chang'e. Qin Feng, watch this place." Qin Feng nodded. "Princess consort, please be at ease." It was naturally not easy to avoid the eyes and ears of so many imperial bodyguards and enter the bedroom. As a result, Yi Li did not do so. Instead, she led Feng Zhiao up the roof. After arriving at a certain location, she stopped. Pointing below, she said, "This is the bedroom of the King of Nanjiao." Yi Li quickly removed the glazed tiles from the roof, not making the slightest sound. Very quickly, everything within the bedroom fell into their eyes. Yi Li had chosen an excellent position. Looking down from above, she could see most of the bedroom. As for the people in the room, because they were blocked by the roof beams, unless they walked down to the hole, it would be very difficult for them to see that a hole had been opened in the roof. Feng Zhiao watched as Yi Li descended from the hole in the roof, silently standing on the roof beam. However, the people in the room were completely unaware of this. With a gloomy expression, the King of Nanjiao stared at Princess Chang'e, who was sitting on a soft couch not far away. His eyes flashed with lust and ruthless anger. This was the eldest princess of the first wife of the Da Chu state. Although she was still young, she was already a young beauty. In 2 more years, she would surpass his daughter, Princess Xixia, who had once been known as the #1 beauty of Nanjiao. Originally, it was not very likely that he would marry such a princess. In the history of the Da Chu state, it was extremely rare for a princess to be given away for political purposes, especially a princess of the first wife. Although he did not know why the emperor of the Da Chu state would give him such a noble princess, he was still extremely satisfied with this gift. Princess Chang'e sat on the soft couch, nervously staring at the tightly shut door to the palace hall. Her hands, hidden within her sleeves, were tightly gripped. The King of Nanjiao stared at her without blinking, completely ignoring the assassins outside the palace hall. Staring at Princess Chang'e's dainty appearance, he revealed an impatient and covetous expression. "Truly a young beauty. The princesses of the Da Chu state are indeed different from the rest. You don't need to worry about the assassins outside. Not to mention a mere dozen people, even if there were 10 times as many people, it would be impossible for them to leave the Nanjiao Palace alive." Princess Chang'e's body trembled, looking at the door in alarm. Finally, a trace of anxiety appeared on her face. Seeing the change in her expression, the King of Nanjiao became even more pleased. "Ha, my young beauty, it's best that you obediently submit to I. As long as you are obedient, I can leave the corpses of those people outside intact." Princess Chang'e clenched her teeth. Suddenly, she stood up and rushed towards the door. How could the King of Nanjiao allow her to rush out? Reaching out, he tightly grasped one of her arms. "Young beauty, what are you in such a hurry for? Ha." Princess Chang'e struggled incessantly. However, how could a weak girl like her be a match for the King of Nanjiao? Her bound arm was unable to move at all, and her face revealed a pained expression. She decided to stop running. Raising her voice, she shouted, "No matter who is outside, I don't want you to save me. Quickly leave." The people fighting outside the palace hall clearly heard her voice. Immediately, one of them shouted, "Princess, this subordinate will definitely save you. All of you, leave. I don't want you to save me." Tears streamed down Princess Chang'e's clear eyes as she sternly shouted. Seeing the King of Nanjiao's complacent, evil grin and his face close to hers, a trace of determination flashed across Princess Chang'e's dainty face. Suddenly, Princess Chang'e raised her still free right hand. A streak of cold light shot out from her sleeve. A dagger glittering with cold light appeared in Princess Chang'e's hand. Without the slightest hesitation, she stabbed towards the King of Nanjiao's hand. How could the king of Nanjiao allow her to stab him with a bayonet? Immediately, he released his hand, causing Princess Changle to stab empty air. Not expecting that this delicate and weak girl before him would actually be so daring, the king of Nanjiao flew into a rage out of humiliation. He slapped Princess Changle across the face, causing her to fall to the ground, a trace of blood seeping out from the corner of her lips. Princess Changle sat on the ground. Raising her head, she coldly gazed at the king of Nanjiao. There was not the slightest trace of fear on her face. Instead, there was the arrogance of a noble princess and contempt for the king of Nanjiao. You are not worthy of humiliating this princess. Finished speaking, Princess Changle unhesitatingly raised the dagger and stabbed towards her own chest. Whoosh! A streak of green light shot down from the ceiling, striking the dagger in Princess Changle's hand. The enormous force of the collision sent the dagger flying. At the same time, a dark green hairpin was nailed to a nearby pillar by Princess Changle's side. The Nanjiao king looked in shock at this sudden situation and raised his head to look at the roof beam. He looked up and saw Yi Li, dressed in black, nonchalantly sitting on the ceiling beam, smiling and nodding at him. The king of Nanjiao recovered from his shock. Just as he was about to call for his imperial bodyguards, he saw a green shadow flash before him. Yi Li had already arrived in front of him. Without the slightest hesitation, she placed a dagger against his neck. Yi Li helplessly looked at Princess Changle and said, "Girl, you are truly ruthless in your actions. With that dagger, you won't even need to take half a breath to see the king of hell." Your Highness." Princess Changle stared at Yi Li in a daze. Clearly, she did not understand why Yi Li would appear here. In a heavy voice, the king of Nanjiao asked, "Princess Ding, what is the meaning of this?" Helplessly, Yi Li replied, "In a moment of desperation, I had no other choice. King of Nanjiao, please forgive me." Yi Li was truly helpless. Since she could not kill the king of Nanjiao, she originally had no intention of appearing before him. As a result, just as she was considering how to make the king of Nanjiao unconscious and take Princess Changle away, before she could act, this scene occurred below. For the sake of Princess Changle's life, Yi Li could only deflect the dagger in Princess Changle's hand. At the same time, she exposed herself in front of others. Chapter 524. Outside the palace hall, the fighting was still in full swing. However, inside the palace hall, the atmosphere was cold and silent. Yi Li's expression was calm as she looked at the king of Nanjiao, who was a head taller than her. Her elegant face revealed an apologetic expression, as if she truly felt guilty for holding him hostage. However, the dagger placed against the king of Nanjiao's neck showed no signs of moving away. The king of Nanjiao only felt the skin on his neck being pierced by the ice-cold dagger, causing his hair to stand on end. "Princess Ding, what are you trying to do?" Yi Li glanced at Princess Changle, who was sitting on the ground. Pursing her lips, she smiled and said, "Why does the king of Nanjiao ask when you already know the answer? Isn't it obvious? You are doing this for this little beauty." The king of Nanjiao was somewhat unconvinced. The little girl before him was the princess of the Da state. She had nothing to do with the Northwest. Naturally, the king of Nanjiao did not believe that Princess Ding had spent so much effort to barge in for a completely unrelated princess. Although she is the princess of the Da state, she has no value to Emperor Chu. Emperor Chu has already gifted her to I. After thinking it over, the king of Nanjiao could only believe that Princess Ding wanted to capture Princess Changle to threaten the emperor of the Da state. Who let the entire world know that the enmity between Prince Ding and Emperor Chu was as deep as the ocean? There is no need for the king of Nanjiao to worry about this. The king of Nanjiao only needs to tell this consort whether or not this consort can take Princess Changle away. Yi Li did not refute his words, indifferently replying. The king of Nanjiao sneered and said, "A beauty gifted by another. If the original consort I wants it, there is nothing wrong with that. However, the princess of Nanjiao can come and go as she pleases. Do you think that there is no one in my Nanjiao?" I urge the Princess of Nanjiao to immediately lay down her weapon. For the sake of Prince Ding, I will not make things difficult for the Princess of Nanjiao. Otherwise, when the imperial bodyguards enter, it will not be so easy for the princess to escape. This king of Nanjiao is not as useless as he seems, Yi Li thought to herself. She smiled indifferently. I'm afraid the guards won't have the chance to come in. Unknowingly, the sounds of fighting outside the door had gradually stopped. Originally, there was still a trace of pride on Nanjiao King's face, but he soon noticed that something was wrong. If the Nanjiao guards won, they would report it outside the hall no matter what. But at this moment, it was completely quiet outside the palace. Not even the slightest sound could be heard inside the palace. Nanjiao King's expression changed, and he said, "My Nanjiao royal palace has 1,000 guards, and Nanjiao capital city has 8,000 elites garrisoned. Even if Shu Manlin was also Nanjiao King's daughter, even if Nanjiao King loved Shu Manlin more, he wouldn't hate Princess Anqi to this extent." Nanjiao King's face flashed with a trace of confusion. Clearly, he didn't understand Yi Li's question. How did he and his eldest daughter become like this today? He still remembered that Anqi was different from Xia, who liked to dance and sing since childhood. She had a straightforward personality and was very calm in her actions. When she was only 13 or 14 years old, she was able to help him deal with the state affairs. She had accepted many of the matters that he himself had been troubled by, and she would handle them properly. At that time, he only thanked the heavens for giving him such a smart daughter. Even if he didn't have a prince, he had no regrets. So he made Anqi the crown princess and watched as Anqi worked hard to govern the country step by step and received the support of the people. But he didn't know when it started, but the joy and relief at the beginning gradually changed. Every time he saw the people show reverence and respect when they saw his daughter, he inexplicably felt displeased. He worked hard to govern the country for decades, but the people always said that this was not good. Even when they saw him, they feared and obeyed him, avoiding reverence and love. Why could his daughter so easily obtain something that he couldn't get in his life? Looking at Nanjiao King's changing expression, Yi Li felt that she already understood. Because of jealousy, not because he was worried about Princess Anqi usurping power, nor because he loved Shu Manlin more. It was just jealousy. A father was jealous of his daughter's ability to govern the country and the support of the people, so he did everything he could to make problems for his daughter. He even allowed others to kill her and added fuel to the fire. Yi Li shook her head and looked at Nanjiao King. If Princess Anqi is really defeated, how will Nanjiao succeed? Nanjiao King, have you really thought it through? The Nanjiao King's expression was ferocious, his breathing gradually becoming hurried. At this moment, Yi Li released the Nanjiao King and walked over to Princess Changle, who had already stood up. Softly laughing, she said, "Princess, let's go." Princess Changle glanced somewhat cautiously at the Nanjiao King, not knowing what he was thinking. His expression was ferocious and distorted, but it was as if he did not see them. Yi Li smiled and said, "There's no need to worry. Let's go." Pulling Princess Changle along, she walked out of the palace hall. Chapter 525. Outside the palace hall, the imperial bodyguards who had been guarding the sleeping quarters and those who had rushed over upon hearing the commotion had all been dealt with. However, there were still 7 or 8 survivors from the other group. Qin Feng and Zhuo Jing stood at the doorway, waiting for Yi Li to emerge. "Princess." As soon as the two emerged, the leader of the survivors immediately rushed forward. However, Zhuo Jing stepped forward and pulled him back. That person promptly replied, "Princess. Princess, are you all right? This subordinate is incompetent. I was unable to rescue the princess earlier." Princess Changle hesitated. After looking at him for a long time, she asked, "You are Imperial Bodyguard Yang?" The man pulled down the veil covering his face, revealing a resolute and somewhat familiar face. Yi Li frowned. After thinking for a moment, She recalled that this was the commander of the imperial bodyguards in the Empress Palace. Yi Li said, "Let's leave the palace first." Imperial bodyguard Yang clearly recognized Yi Li deferentially. He said, "Many thanks to Princess for your assistance." The party exited the palace. As expected, they did not encounter any obstructions along the way. The plaza outside the palace gates was still lively and jubilant. However, if one looked carefully, they would discover that the people who should have been there were no longer there. Without any delay, Yi Li and her entourage returned to the relay station. Before they could ask any questions, Imperial bodyguard Yang knelt on the ground in front of Princess Changle, stating, "This subordinate is incompetent and has given the princess a fright. This is the antidote. Princess, please take it quickly." From his sleeve, he withdrew a small green porcelain bottle and presented it to Princess Changle. Frowning, Yi Li asked, "Princess, you have been poisoned?" Along the way, Princess Changle's expression was normal. There were no abnormalities in her body. There were no signs of poisoning. Princess Changle hesitated for a moment before nodding her head. Imperial bodyguard Yang spoke with grief and indignation. "If not for that vicious woman poisoning the princess, how could we have saved the princess so late? Only that vicious woman has this poison. As soon as we saved the princess, she would immediately destroy the antidote. As a result, we could only try to obtain the antidote before we could save the princess. This was why the princess was sent to the palace." "Noble consort Liu?" Yi Li asked, "How did you get the antidote?" Bodyguard Yang said, "That vicious woman sent the princess into the palace and thought that the antidote was dispensable. But even so, 7 or 8 of our brothers still died to get the antidote. Fortunately, we made it in time. Otherwise, even if we were to die 10,000 times, we would not have the face to face the Empress and the old Duke." Yi Li raised her eyebrows and said, "Did the Empress send you to save the princess?" Imperial bodyguard Yang sternly replied, "That's only natural. Every single one of your subordinates is Her Majesty the Empress's trusted aide and has received Her Majesty's grace. There were also a few brothers who had received Duke Hua's favor in the past. Originally, we wanted to make a move on the road, but we couldn't get the antidote. We also didn't dare to rashly take the princess's life. This subordinate thanks Wang Fei for her help." Hearing news of her imperial mother, Princess Changle's face was already covered in tears. Holding the medicine bottle, she promptly asked, "How is my imperial mother?" Imperial bodyguard Yang hesitated for a moment before replying, "Her Majesty the Empress." When this subordinate left the capital, Her Majesty the Empress was still under house arrest in the palace. However, please be at ease, Princess. The old Duke has already made arrangements. Her Majesty the Empress has also said that even if she is not free, His Majesty will ensure her safety for the sake of face. I only ask that Princess not return to the Chu capital in the future. This is something that Her Majesty the Empress entrusted this subordinate to give to Princess. Imperial bodyguard Yang then handed over a small, exquisite, and ordinary wooden box. Princess Changle stared blankly. Opening the box, she saw that it was only about 1 kun wide and 4 or 5 kun long. Opening the box, she saw several banknotes folded inside. On top of the banknotes, there was an exquisite, gorgeous hairpin and 7 or 8 luminous pearls. Although she did not see the denomination of the banknotes, she could tell from the luminous pearls that any one of them would be enough for Princess Changle to live the rest of her life without worry. Princess Ding. Imperial Mother doesn't want me anymore? Princess Changle asked in a low voice as she held the box. Yi Li sighed softly. Your Imperial Mother is doing this for your own good. Princess Changle had not been sent for a political marriage. Rather, she had been given to the King of Nanzhao by Mo Jingqi. This meant that in the future, Princess Changle would never be able to appear before the Chu capital and the common people as a princess. Otherwise, when the time came, since Mo Jingqi was able to harden his heart and give his daughter to the King of Nanzhao, he would naturally be able to harden his heart and take her life. I know, Princess Changle said as she held the wooden box. However, she could not help but begin to sob. Henceforth, she would no longer be the Princess Changle of the Da Chu state. Presumably, her imperial father would soon have someone spread the news that Princess Changle had passed away from illness. Henceforth, she would no longer be able to see her imperial mother and maternal grandfather. She could only wander the outside world without a name or surname. Seeing Princess Changle's sorrowful appearance, Yi Li reached out and stroked her hair, saying, "Good child, don't be sad. When the matters in the southern border are settled, why don't you come with us to the northwest?" Princess Changle hesitated for a moment before refusing Yi Li's proposal. "Many thanks, Princess Ding. However, my status is inconvenient. I fear that I will bring trouble to you and Uncle Prince Ding." Yi Li smiled and said, "You have even broken into the Nanjiao Palace. How can that be considered trouble? When I return, I will have someone take a look at this antidote. Princess, please rest well. As for the rest, wait for your Uncle Prince Ding to return. No one dares to casually break in here." Imperial bodyguard Yang was delighted to hear Yi Li's words. What the Empress and the old Duke were most worried about was Princess Changle living alone outside. Although they had made arrangements to secretly protect the princess, in this chaotic world, who could confidently say that anywhere was safe except for the northwest? Originally, they had planned to secretly send the princess to the northwest to live in anonymity. With Princess Ding's invitation, it was naturally better for the princess. This subordinate thanks Princess Ding on behalf of the Empress and the old Duke. Waving her hand, Yi Li stated, "Our prince respects the Empress as his elder sister. Duke of Hua has watched the prince grow up. The eldest young miss of the Hua family is this consort's good friend. Princess Changle is naturally not an outsider." Imperial bodyguard Yang expressed his thanks once more. Gazing at Yi Li, Princess Changle stated, "I am no longer a princess. Imperial mother has given me the nickname Wuyo. Princess consort, please call me Wuyo." Wuyo was always happy. From this, it could be seen that the Empress loved her daughter dearly. Yi Li smiled and nodded. "Okay. Wuyo must be tired. Return to your room and rest." Princess Changle nodded her head and followed the imperial bodyguard to the room that was still empty. As soon as the door was closed, Wuyo collapsed onto the bed and began to sob while biting the quilt. While she was sobbing, she did not know that the people outside the room were all people with exquisite internal energy. Naturally, they could hear her clearly. Yi Li turned her head to look at Feng Jiao, who was standing under the shadow of the nearby eaves, and sighed silently. "You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.